Good morning, everybody. Want to say to each and every one of you, thank you for being a part of this Colloquium Day 4. It seemed like we just got started. I will tell you this. It must be because, the week really goes bad when we celebrate Dr. James Coleman's birthday. It just zoom, zoom, zoom. So we're excited about what's happening this week. Let me just say to you, those of you on the Zoom today, that we talked about Y.T. Walker periodically. Dr. Mays, you can remember Y.T. Walker came to the campus, and two things that he said. He said, always have a sense of humor and laugh. You'd be surprised. I was at the gym this morning, and the only way that you can exercise your liver is to laugh. And if you look at that word liver and take the R off, you get live. You turn it around, it sounds something like EVIL. But if you would turn the EVIL to LIVE, for the just shall live by faith. All right, that's just your inspirational word for this morning. And so thank you for being a part of this Zoom. I'm going to ask if my colleague, Dr. Carlton Jackson, will lead us into the throne room. Praise the Lord.
All right. Thank you, Dr. Campbell. As we bow together, Father, we thank you once again for another day as we continue our colloquium, Lord. We thank you for what we have heard and seen and experienced. We ask that you would continue that today through our facilitators and our student learner candidates and staff. Lord, we just commit this time to you, ask that you would bless it, that we may learn from one another and then be able to share that in our individual contexts. Lord, help us to grasp this information that is being shared with us, and Lord, that we might share it with our people, our family, our community, that they all may be made better because of you. Thank you for what will occur today. In Jesus' name, amen.
I yield to Dr. James Coleman.
All right, everyone. Today we are opening up with an opportunity for you to what I like to call connect the dots. Connecting the dots is so important. How does Monday relate to Tuesday? How does Wednesday build on Monday and Tuesday? Happened in one setting. What impact does it have on my deeper understandings as I now march triumphantly into Thursday, October the 5th? So our distinguished faculty today wants to have an opportunity to see where you are and how the impartations in the academic world of James W.E. Dixon II, Rosalind Brock, even the words that Philip Campbell gave opening up. What impact did Freddie Haynes have on you? What they each have had to say. What are your takeaways so far? What are some things that we need to make sure that we ask, ASK? I did not say ASS, I said ASK. You have to do that in the governmental world, because sometimes when you're talking about ask, you have to spell it so that the people will know what you're saying. Ask, ASK. What should we be asking Susan Johnson Cook, whose body of work was so impressive that an American president appointed her as the ambassador for international freedom during his administration? And can I tell you, as we connect the dots, iron sharpens iron, shoulder to shoulder. You get great by hanging out with greatness. You get better by raising questions to those who have had firsthand experience with the subject matter. That's why we selected these people. And by the way, thank you for your graciousness and paying your tuition and all of the fees that you pay so that we can bring these high caliber minds to you. So when Susan Johnson Cook comes on today, what ought we ask her? Elaine Flake, a powerful, celebrated author, and now the titular head, the pastor of one of the largest AME churches in the United States of America. You're going to have her in front of you and not ask her a question? I make argument that the beginning of the building of bridges and not walls of racial injustice comes with the courage, yet still, to speak truth to power, to clear your throat and raise a question to people who can assist you in being an agent for change and transformation in our global village. Now, having said that, also keep in mind that on tomorrow, we're going to have Matt Wilmington tomorrow from Liberty University. Now, I do want you to know, I hope I can be heard. I look like I'm freezing while I'm moving. I don't know, but I'm doing the best I can. Liberty is in the news here. I don't know if you all keep up with the news in that way, but Liberty is being reviewed now for a lot of things as it relates to how they have handled sexual misconduct on their campus. Somebody raise your hand and tell me if you've seen all of that in the national news. Just raise your hand so I can see if I'm talking to, I see Desiree's hand up, I see David Penn and Deborah Fields Harris. Not the world's greatest and largest Christian institution. Oh, Mays, they couldn't possibly be having any problem like that over there. And it is alleged that they cover these things up when they happen. Collusion and all of that. Milton Button said he knows. And so it just goes to show you that everybody got problems. Some people just have enough money to throw around to make the problems go away. But obviously, even Liberty doesn't have enough money to keep these problems from hitting the national news that they've tried to hold back for years. Matt Wilmington is going to be with us tomorrow. The only European Caucasian to speak to the general body. We did have Kim Sinha to the nuts and bolts class. And with intentionality, we asked him to come because I sat in a session with him in tears at breakfast one day, and he lamented many of the things that have happened at Liberty University and Thomas Rowe Baptist Church that were so regrettable. And they are trying to pave another path of collaboration that has some teeth to it, so that what we call white theology could somehow find its way in a wedded condition with liberation or Black theology. What ought we ask him tomorrow? So now I want to open the floor to our first panelist, who will give some of his thoughts about these matters, our distinguished Vice President for Academic Affairs, Dr. Marshall Mays. The floor is yours, sir.
Thank you, Dr. Coleman, our Dean, and our Director, Dr. Campbell, and good morning to each of you. My concern, if we would read the abstract that is so well put together by our staff and our Dean, Dr. James Coleman, in that first paragraph of the 1, 2, 3, the third paragraph of the abstract. It talks about, and I'm gonna read it for you. It said, this leads us to the need for a serious, crucial conversation about the role of the church practitioner and the Black church in addressing this matter. Two groups of people, the church practitioners, and I take as the preacher pastor, and also the congregation as a whole. Of what's our role in addressing this issue of building bridges and not walls of racial injustice? I concluded that in the community that I live in, that the church practitioners are afraid to address the issue of social justice, injustice, for some reason. And I also suggest that in the community that I live in, the church itself, the congregation, some of them are not ready. They are not ready to address the issue. They're not even ready in the area I live in to worship together. My dear friend, I would not call his name, is in revival this week, and on Tuesday night, he had a female white pastor of a United Methodist Church to be the revivalist, and it was embarrassing. It was embarrassing to the fact that the white attendees outnumbered the blacks and even his own members. Only seven African Americans were in the congregation. The rest was from the white United Methodist Church. And I concluded that we are not even willing to worship together. If the practitioner in the church, white and blacks, cannot work together, we'll never resolve this issue of social injustice. We'll never build the bridge. That's my conclusion, Dr. Coleman. Anyone want to piggyback on what I just stated?
Yes. Come
Why
on,
do
y'all,
we-
talk to me now. This machine, sometimes I push buttons and it just don't move like I want. But somebody, go ahead, Desiree, talk to me.
Yeah. I think that during this climate that we're in, from 2016 on, has caused, no doubt, we know, a lot of racial tension with the MAGA movement. And a lot of the evangelicals in the beginning supported, and some still in support of that movement, which are predominantly, I would say predominantly, not all, but predominantly of the white Anglo-Saxon race. So I'm not sure why there was only 7 at that particular revival night, but it could be that we as a people are skeptical of possibly those who proclaim that they want to reach out, and rightly they could possibly and probably so sincerely doing so. But because of what we have encountered over since 2016 on, there may be some hesitation there. Should there be? No, because we're all children of God, right? So there's no white, black, male, female, whatever. God sees us all the same way. However, we all have our own biases. We can say we don't, we can pretend we don't, but we all have our own biases. And sometimes those biases interplay into how we look at people, how we feel like people are where they're coming from, and therefore our biases can overtake what really should be in the forefront, which is acceptance of all, because that's how God sees everybody the same, right? If he sees everybody the same, we should take that response, take that how we are to be if we say we are of Christ and of God. Again, relationship building. I don't know. Did the pastor have a relationship with that pastor or evangelist or whomever he invited? Did he have a relationship with that person, or did he just know that person through someone, or knew of that person, or was an acquaintance of that person and thought it was a good idea, which it sounds like it was a good idea to invite her into a predominantly Black congregation. But we've all been talking about this whole week how important relationship building is. Building bridges takes time, and relationship building takes time. It's not something that happens overnight. We've heard that consistently in the presenters. So that's my take. But Dr. Coleman, I came across an article, and could I share this article? Just a snippet of this article, because it relates to what we've been talking about. And when I saw it, I said, "Oh my God, I need to share this if at all possible. May I just take a little bit of time to share this?"
I'm hoping you can hear me say, yes, you can. Now
Okay.
you all are getting into the realm of the academy. I'm going to say something that Vernon John said a little later. Now you're going at it. Go ahead, Desiree.
Oh,
Quickly
okay.
tell us what you want us to.
All right. The article came from, and many of you may know, the Washington Informer. I think there's some of you maybe in the DC area. This is the Washington Informer. I know that that's hard to see, but on the front page, it says Washington National Cathedral unveils racial justice stained glass windows. I'll read that again. The title is Washington National Cathedral unveils racial justice stained glass windows.
Hey, baby.
The Windows by Kerry James
Yes.
Marshall.
They told mommy, and they didn't tell me.
And
Oh, I forget what shoes I wore.
John, you need to put your just push the button. I do that sometimes, everybody. It's all right. There you go. Go ahead. Go ahead, Desiree.
The Windows by Kerry James Marshall and Poetry by Elizabeth Alexander replaces monuments honoring Confederate generals. The reimagined windows, titled Now and Forever, marked a new chapter in the cathedral's historical legacy of art and architecture that replaced previous stone tablets that pay tribute to Confederate generals, tribute to Robert E. Lee and Thomas Stonewall Jackson. It goes on to say that the new windows and poem are reminders of the cathedral's mission of inclusivity. Inclusivity, is that not what your theme, inclusivity, what we're trying to do here, right? Inclusivity, right? This is a house, and a quote, "This is a house of prayer for all of God's children and a house of prayer for all of God's people." That was the Reverend Canon Rosemary Logan Duncan, who works to put together all services at the National Cathedral. Get this, this is not just any house, this is the National Cathedral. If you know anything, but the National Cathedral is the main monument house or whatever of pretty much the Episcopalians, not Protestants per se, but the Episcopalians, so forth, of the churches in the nation. It goes on to say the cathedral commits to racial justice and reconciliation. They say this is just the beginning. The service, there was a service, and it concluded with all people singing, "Lift Every Voice and Sing," as we know as the Black National Anthem. Following the service, the Reverend Canon Hagan said, "This is just the beginning that should represent how we are to move forward and fill this breach. As we come into this space," Hagan's continued, "it should be a symbol that should inspire us and give us hope." So, talking about bridging, making bridges and not walls, I thought this was an excellent example of at least a start, that somebody is recognizing what the theme of this colloquium is about. And we've heard through many, I'm sorry, I'm taking too much time. Dr. The one yesterday, Dr. from, help me somebody, then Brock.
Dr.
Yeah,
Brock.
Dr. Brock said, and also Dixon said, and Haynes, what an awesome theme that you have. What an awesome theme, and how appropriate it is for this day and time. So I just wanted to share this, that this is an example of people are thinking of ways to try to build bridges and not walls. Thank you.
Wow, what do you all think about that? These buddies, boy. What do you think about that?
I think that's good, but Washington D.C. is a very progressive area. Where I pastor, and I'm sure most of you all have seen on the national news where that a National Guardsman was stopped by the police in Windsor. I passed 5 miles from there. I started our church 30 years ago, and what I have watched is race relations get worse over the 30 years. When I first was down there, there was a Presbyterian church, which is right across the street from me. I met the new pastor. He invited me over to do his installation service. They had started an ecumenical, biracial, intermixtual racial group, pastors' meetings. All of that dissipated over time. And whereas they were trying to build bridges down there 30 years ago, those bridges have now become walls, which is what I have experienced where I pastor at. And I am like in Isle of Wight, a stone's throw from Southampton County, where they hung Nat Turner. And
Wow.
I've watched it over 30 years, and the whites and the blacks, it seems that they get along on a surface level, but yet underneath, in the things that matter, racism is still alive and well, if that makes any sense. But I thought the presenters were great. Let me say that also. I thought that Dr. Haynes, of course, was his regularly brilliant self, and I was introduced to Dr. Brock. I never had met her or heard her before. She was awesome as well.
Got it. All right. Wow. Okay. Very good. Very good. Very good. Very good.
Dr.
Let's
Coleman.
build. Yes, go ahead. To be Dr. Brandon. Go right ahead.
I want to be the maybe be the I don't want to say devil's advocate, but I want to piggyback off of what Bishop O'Million said and the sister before. I take a different view in this whole thing about building bridges. I think sometimes we are so critical the Black church, or even hypercritical of the African American church when it comes to always reaching out and try to build bridges. We've always reached out and tried to be amenable and build relationships with others. The question is, do others want to build bridges back towards us? You just heard Bishop Gamillion speak about his context. When I was in Dinwiddie County, it was the same thing with in the context with a church that I pastored. We were a rock throw from the Methodist church up the street, and I invited them to come to share a night in the revival service, and it was only the pastor showed up. And so my question is, do they really want to build bridges to us, or why is it that we're the only ones building bridges?
All right, let me just say something here, and then we'll bring Campbell on to move us to another level. Brandon, I see both sides of that.
Amen.
What you said was so powerful, but I see both sides of this. Unfortunately, in many of our communities, or maybe it is just indigenous to Lynchburg, Virginia, maybe, you often hear white stakeholders in the community, white philanthropists, white bearers of power and privilege, say we have made ourselves available. In fact, the only reason why what's good is going on in this community is because we've invested the money in it. We've shown up. You don't show up. Your people don't show up. Your people don't give a damn. Where are they?
Well, can I say this very briefly? White practitioners have less power in their churches than Black practitioners.
Mm.
And
yes,
But people still got to show up.
yeah, I'm talking about our people have to show up, but
Right.
they are unable to influence their people to show up as much as we can influence our people to show up.
Well, y'all getting some good stuff on here now, Amelia. Brandon's question is,
Dr.
Yeah, go ahead.
Dr.
Go
Cole,
ahead.
Dr. Coleman, I heard Gamia, and the incident that I faced, I shared in the other night. It was our people that didn't show up. They showed up. That pastor showed up, that choir showed up, that member showed up. Our people didn't show up.
See, the real issue.
I think Dr. Coleman, being that we're right here and discussing this matter, like we're discussing it, it gives us, and we're definitely, even looking at our first assignment on self-analysis, it gives the church a wonderful opportunity when we are discussing matters like this for them to self-assess and to see and to have discussions to see what's going on as to why their parishioners are not participating. What's the problem? Yeah, I mean, we're discussing what our assignments are: self-analysis and spiritual autobiographies that we're about to do. It gives us a wonderful time to self-retrospect and look at self and then see where we err so we can work on fixing it. It's worth having those conversations. It's worth sitting down with our parishioners and to see why or what's going on. Or if not, as we've been saying, if we don't do anything about it, if we sit back and say nothing, it's just going to continue to spiral downward. So I think
that's good in itself. Socrates, know thyself. Brandon, you raised the question, and it's a huge, quintessential, relevant question, being that when we talk to the Matt Wilmingtons of the world on the side that you're talking about, is this a pacifying conversation? Are we willing to redistribute the wealth? Are we willing to handle equity? Because equity always creates culture of adjustment from those who have to those who have not, or those who have not having what those who have. And philosophically, there are some who still believe in the white community that we are incorrigible, we are lazy, we want a free meal. When we built this country, the audacity.
Yeah.
So the issue is really on both sides. Do we even believe that bridge building is relationship building? Will any effort in this regard make our plight as Blacks in America better, or will our efforts make things worse and it becomes a waste of time? I'm gonna turn the mic back over to y'all and then Campbell. But remember, Haynes said to us, what we ought to be doing is coming together, even in the D-Men program, and establishing, watch this, Delphine, he said a 100-year plan. Hey, all of you on this room, if you don't know it, I hate to break the bad news to you. None of us will be here 100 years from now. But Scientologists say that this country, this universe has 5 billion years left. Now we're messing it up with global warming, may shrink it down exponentially. I don't know, David Penn. But have you even thought about the world beyond your life? Are we so consumed in what Rosenbrock said, status over substance? And if substance is going to compromise my status, I don't want to talk about it. Have we seriously had thoughts about what the world ought to look like 100 years from now, from our theological perspective? And are we making the appropriate bridge building decisions? Are we making the appropriate deconstruction of walls of racial injustice decisions? So that if I'm 58 yesterday, Campbell, how many more years I got? I don't know. Who dropped dead today? Theodicy could get me on a wrong path easily. I don't know. I don't know how many of y'all got. But the issue is, talk to me. Somebody want to say something?
Dr. Coleman, you know, I spent much of my life working for the federal government and working in equal employment opportunity. And based upon whatever commanding general had to post, equal employment opportunity would either be window dressing or substance. And that's what I want to know when I go to a meeting with one of my white brothers. Is this meeting going to be window dressing or is it going to be substance? Are we going to do something about what we're talking about, or are we just meeting to look like we're going to do something?
All right, now, Gamelia, what you just said sounds good. You're one of the great bishops of this nation, leading that great full gospel movement and rural churches and all of that. Do you really do that when you go in a meeting? Then when you sit down and shake somebody's hand, do you clear your throat and really say, is this going to be window washing or is this going to be substance? Do you really do that?
I would do it.
All right. How many of you all do that? Or do you scared to do that? You need to go. Now, how many of you that level of courage to say, I don't want to hear about what your agenda is. I want to tell you what my agenda is. And then let's see how, because you're going to impress me with your agenda, in which you just talking about a whole bunch of stuff that in the back room, you already thought about a plan to make sure everything you promised me is not going to happen. And you make me leave the room feeling good about a plan that you have no intention to execute. But since you know I don't have one, anything you say sounds good. Or do you operate like Amelia and go here, wait a minute, I'm glad we're meeting, but we're going to meet and we are not going to have some white window washing or window dressing session. Here's what we are about. How can we meet somewhere with this? I saw somebody.
I'd like to say this.
I think y'all go in meetings and say, yes, ma'am, yes, sir, yes, master, yes, whatever it is. You sit there and go home with your little crumbs and That's it.
Oh no. Oh
Well,
no.
go ahead,
Oh
Dr.
no,
Coleman,
James
try to
Coleman.
ruffle it up. But I'd like to say that the issue is layers and layers, years and years, decades and centuries. And one meeting that was held at a church the other night is not going to solve it. I think there's a whole lot of distrust that's there from the
Yeah.
Black community,
Yes,
even
sir.
when we
Yes, sir.
invite the
Yes,
white
sir.
community in.
Yes,
One
sir.
of those reasons is I don't know how many still have your Dake's annotated Bible. And the Dake's annotated Bible is probably one of the most racist documents
Yes,
using
sir.
biblical literature that's ever been around. To where Finis Dates takes Acts chapter 17, verse number 26, and gives 30 reasons why races should be separated. And it was something that was highly used in the late 40s and the 50s, and even going into the 60s to keep them separated from us, whether it was United Methodist or it was Southern Baptist. We still see some of those layers that are still there. So when it comes to reaching out, there's a whole lot of distrust from the Black side of the table to those whites that are reaching out, because they have used the Bible as a means not only to keep us enslaved at one point, but to keep us subject and inferior to them throughout this country's history. And so when we want to have these meetings, there is a lot of distrust because we look at them as using the Bible as a way to hold us in our place. And on this call in particular, and in our cohort, we have Jackie Gilchrist, who is somewhat an anomaly in that she is a Black woman that is pastoring a traditionally white church. She's making inroads that a whole lot of us have not seen. But I still think that even in her context, she's going to have to deal with a lot of layers of racism that are there when it comes to her church fellowshipping with other churches, being involved with other community activities that would be church related. That there's probably going to be those layers that are still there, to which Martin Luther King and others have said that the hour of worship, or 11 a.m. on Sunday, is the most segregated hour in America. We have not found ways to go past the Bible being misused to keep a people subject to another, to where white supremacy is still something that we're dealing with, which is why we're having all of the stupid arguments in this country regarding critical race theory.
To be Dr. Miller, you brought that up. Wait a minute, hold on, y'all. I'm coming right back to you. Now, aren't you in California? Aren't you in Cali?
I am in Stockton, California, California's 12th largest city, said to be the most racially diverse city, but it is also one of the state's most racially divided cities.
Yeah.
People stay with their own people.
It's 7:39 in the morning where you are, right?
Yes, it is.
I mean, you a bad brother, boy, and you wax eloquent. Now I feel like I'm in a daggone doctoral program with learners whose cognition is being driven to the highest level possible. And you made me think about the fact that even in our city, there are more African Americans who are members of Thomas Road than our largest African American church.
Wow.
Blacks will go to Thomas Road, and others, white pastors.
Yep, tree of life.
But conversely, we don't see it.
Yep, tree of life.
Yeah, when we look at churches that are said to be culturally diverse, most of them are pastored by white pastors. That same love is not given to the Black pastor.
Dr. Coleman, I had a question and then a comment. First, the question was for Dr. to be Antoine Miller. What was the scripture that you gave that was in that Bible?
Acts 17:26.
17:26.
And in the Finis Dake's annotated Bible, it's one of many scriptures that he uses that had undergirded white supremacy in the 50s. It's one of the reasons Furman tried to use their separation of race and state to remain a white university. And it wasn't until Title IX arguments and losing money that they started to allow Black students to be a part of Furman.
So what did you say was the Dake annotated Bible?
Dates. Finis Dake.
Okay.
D-A-K-E.
Okay, because I have it.
Yeah, that
That's
was
why I
one
wanted
of
to
the.
know I wanted to know the scripture so I could go back and reference that. But the comment that I wanted to make, first off, with Dr. Mays, I think the members were absolutely wrong. You know, they had a guest at their church. They should have supported their pastor. They should have supported their church, no matter who was there. So they were wrong with that. But one question, you know, I always had, you know, because my church is predominantly Black, and I have always attended predominantly Black church, the two churches that I attended throughout the years. And I always wondered why, even though the message is preached at Black churches and white churches, why I was just always so drawn to the African American church. Though I attended a white church when I was in college for a couple of months. But then I took and I thought it was just the music, the cultural piece and all of that. I love good preaching. Gilbert Patterson was probably one of my favorite preachers. He could read the nursery rhymes and I would love it because of his delivery, right? But then I took the homiletics class from Dr. Coleman. And one of the books that they assigned was The Heart of Black Preaching, right? And one of the things that the author talked about was how Black preachers preach about God from a Black experience, right? In a way of showing deliverance, God's active in our lives, looking out for us, acting on our behalf. And so because of the things that we go through, whether they were during slavery, Reconstruction, civil rights, even today, we are going through things and we really need God to work on our behalf in the workplace. Even though some of the things are different, there's still a lot of discrimination, a lot of systemic racism. And so we need to hear those types of messages. I know I needed to hear those type of messages from my pastor before I retired, when I had to go into the Department of Defense every day with the traditional white males, right? And I really needed to be inspired and know that God was working in my favor. He was working on my behalf, and I could get through it. So a lot of it has to do with the messaging that you hear in the church. I don't discriminate. I may have biases. I have admit we all have biases. I don't have anything against my white brothers and sisters, but when I hear a message on Sunday, I need something that's going to inspire me. From someone who knows the struggle that I'm going through. And sometimes we don't get those type of messages from our white sisters and brothers because they don't walk in the same experience. I can listen to you. I will visit your church. If you come, my pastor invite you to my church, I'm going to go because I support my pastor, I support my church, but I can't sit under that. If I can't be inspired, I'm not going to be able to sit under that Sunday after Sunday when I know the struggle that I'm going through. I need somebody who understands the struggle and can speak to that based on experience. And then I haven't really talked to Jackie as much about, you know, what she teaches to her congregation. I'm sure she does a wonderful job, but I'm sure she has to keep in mind the people that she's ministering to. Right. And so I think that's part of it. You know, you go where you're inspired. And that's pretty much where I am. And if that doesn't lead to, you know, churchdom coming together, you know, I don't know how to fix that. If we can't come together without having to attend each other's churches or to mix the race or whatever, I think you just need to go where you're inspired. I guess that's what I'm trying to say. Thank you.
Dr. Coleman?
Yes.
This is to
Yes.
be Dr. Briggs. I can contest to that because where I serve, we have a multicultural church, but even in a multicultural church, my pastor, he does preach messages, I believe, that other cultures can relate.
But from my experience, and since I've been at the church, I can see just sitting out in the audience, you know, that from the pews, that they have a hard time accepting the Black experience. And so when my pastor is preaching those messages, a lot of times it's like it's hard for them to have, I'm sorry, my daughter is talking. It's hard to
That's
have
all
those
right.
open conversations.
She gonna be a super.
I know. It just seems like when my pastor is sharing from a Black experience, I can look around the room, even when we're serving our community, you can see the hidden biases in other cultures, especially the Caucasian, where it's difficult to have open conversations, you know, and create true commitment and covenant because they see it from one side, like a one-sided perspective. And it's like, it's just a conversation going on at the same time. If you understand what I'm saying, like our pastor could be preaching and we could be serving our community because we do serve in Richmond and we serve in an area where there's we serve in communities in Richmond where there are a lot of, you know, mostly Black people in need. But even when my white counterparts are out there serving with us, even their response to the poor, those are in need, is different. It's like they don't even know how to respond to someone who's in need, who's hungry, who's strung out on drugs, or, you know, who don't have a place to lay their head. The way we reach out is even different. So I'm just saying, in reference to what the previous speaker just spoke, I have witnessed that segregation even in our own church, even though it's a multicultural atmosphere.
Wow, that's huge. That's huge.
Can I piggyback on what she said?
Yes.
Just to say this very briefly, that it's not what is there to be seen, but it's the perspective from which you see it from that dictates what you see.
Wow.
That's why two people see a murder differently.
Oh, good God, two people see a murder differently.
Because it's the perspective. The same issue with slavery, discrimination. It's the perspective from which you see it from that dictates what you see.
12 minutes before the job. All right, class. All right, so that's huge. To be Dr. Gilchrist, is your hand up, or can I now take this conversation on into Dr. Campbell's lap for a few minutes because we got to shut this down.
Well, my hand was up, but you can go to Dr. Campbell if you need to.
Take us where you want us to go.
Well, I was just going to comment on my experience here as Antoine was talking about as a Black female pastor serving a historically white church. My church is very diverse since I've become the pastor. When I became the pastor, it was primarily white, and you might have one or two of us in the mix. Since I've become the pastor, that has changed drastically, where we have several of us, meaning Black Americans, that are a part of this ministry. I just did a new members class on last night where I have a Black male who is engaged, and they're getting married here as well. And they just joined the church to a Peruvian, a Spanish woman. And those that are here that are as far as being white members are coming from primarily Catholic backgrounds. So it's a very interesting dynamic that I have going here. The Blacks that are coming here are people that have come out of Baptist or Pentecostal and whatnot. And what they're looking for is a teaching ministry. And if we notice if you go to these white mega churches and whatnot, and you have Black members that are there, if you ask them, because I've done research on it, we wanted to have a teaching ministry more than just preaching a sermon all the time. Now, I come out of a Pentecostal background, Church of God in Christ, but I'm ordained Baptist. That is where my training is and whatnot. I've been there for several years. My pastor he's retired, Reverend Robert W. Perry from Union Baptist in Stanford. Now, I come out of that tradition. Pastoring here, that's what I brought. Okay, I taught in a way that they could receive it and whatnot. But recently, since we've come back from the pandemic and whatnot, as well as after my accident, I was not able to do what I was doing prior. And I started teaching, sitting down actually and teaching because of my physical problems. What happened was they started coming to me and saying, Pastor, we're loving this. And I'm like, loving what? We love you teaching us where we can engage with what the message you're saying versus you giving us a sermon. And so it has transitioned in the last, I guess, since May at my church, and they are just sapping it up because they said, we're learning. Instead of you preaching to us and giving us a sermon, we want to be taught about our faith, and we want to be able to ask questions. And so it has truly been a transition, but a lot of Black people are going to white ministries. And if you ask them, that's why they're going. They're looking for a teaching ministry. Just wanted to share that.
I gotta have both.
You gotta have both.
And maybe it's because of my age. Maybe it's because of my age, but I gotta have good teaching and I need some good inspirational preaching. But I appreciate some good teaching too. Dr. Campbell knows that. But I gotta have.
It's a challenge for me. It's a definite challenge for me because of my background. And sometimes I forget where I'm at. And I go in and I've caught I went speaking in tongues one day, and my husband was in the balcony saying, no, don't go there, because they weren't ready for that.
Yes. Well, you're doing
sometimes
you're doing what you need to do where you are. And I applaud you for that. And congratulations for the church growing too. Because I know you've been praying for that.
And John Kennedy at Virginia Union, Dean Emeritus there, always said that we in our practice should engage the head and the heart. The head and the heart ultimately cause your hands to do something that will bring transformation. And I see Dr. Miller clapping his hands. So at the end of the day, in the words of Tina Turner, if you do it nice and slow, or if you do it, I forgot what the other part. What is the other part? Rough and whatever it is.
Be careful, Doctor. Be careful, Dr. Cobra.
That's Sister Mary's song, or whatever it is. Bless her heart, she just has been gathered unto the fathers. But however you do it, no emotion. What impact is it going to have on the hands and the heart of the community? And by the way, to be Angelo Sullivan, you're going to hear from me today. I will call you today. You got a great picture up there of you. I'm so proud of you. Dr. Campbell, what do you want to say to us?
I mean, Coleman, it's been a lot that's been assimilated. Some things I was going to say, I just like to echo. First of all, when we talk about these building bridges and not walls, I like what our facilitator said in reference to construction. And you all hit it, the nail on the head. Even in Danville, we have so many of our Black brothers and sisters that are going to white churches, so-called white pastors. But I like to carry it even a little further. They even go into white funeral homes. And for the most part, you do not see our white brothers and sisters investing in the Black community. They do not send their loved ones to a Black funeral home. But we tend to extend ourselves more so. And Brandon, I wanna also tackle something that you mentioned, that in reference to the reach out. This is what I know, that for the most part, many of our white brothers and sisters did not want integration. It was forced integration. They wanted us to be separate. We forced them to allow us to be a part of what they do. They wanted us to be segregated. And if the truth be told, I don't know if that was the best, the integration was the best for our kids, because I think all of us could probably attest to the fact that when we had segregation, that our kids, they learned more. There was a more a community base. Everybody was concerned about everybody's kids. So I don't know when the dynamics change if that was the best for us, because we tend to want it to move out from the ghetto and from the projects and to go to the suburbs, and we tend to forget about where we came from. And so this is what I know, that we're going to have to speak truth to power to make sure we're building bridges and not walls, not just with the white community. I'm hearing that a lot, but I think we need to build these bridges and not walls in our own community and with our own pastors and churches in Danville, Virginia. And of course, some of you know that now we have the casino. Caesars is moving in and has changed the dynamics of this whole city. The whole city. They did just last month almost $25 million profit. It has changed everything. Matter of fact, somebody even took the offering up last week and found a chip, you see, in the offering plate. Told them to go cash it. I didn't go cash it, but go cash that chip. But it has changed everything. They're estimating that there will be at least 2 million persons just coming through this little city of Danville, Virginia. Everything has changed. And so we have over 400 churches, Black churches, 400 plus churches in the city of Danville, storefronts, little houses that 3 and 4, pastors with 2 and 3 members in the same house. You see, and I'm sure it's probably happening in your area as well. I think that for us to bring some kind of sense to building bridges and not walls, one of the things that really touched me in the takeaway is what Dr. Dixon said. And I want to say this to everybody because I moved on it expeditiously when he said it. In reference to, do you have a social justice component in your church? And I immediately called one of the elders in my church, Vincent Brown, and I said, I want to put you over the social justice committee, because many times we are more focused in on church work than the work of the church. Church work in reference to who's going to drive the bus. Church work, who's going to be in the kitchen frying fish. Church work, who's going to be the praise leader. But the work of the church, maybe that's something that we need to think more of to make sure that we are dealing with the total man, the trichotomous being, body, soul, and spirit. And that touched me deeply because I didn't have a social justice. I'm on a lot of committees. What I have done here at the Bible Way site, if y'all have not been here, you know, we have about 30-something teachers. We have principals. We have a different array of persons in the church that centers around helping the community. But this is something I want to extend to every one of you. Get persons in your church and every board and commission in the city, the planning board, the housing board, the zoning board, because what happens is we are not in the mix, and there are things that are happening in your community that could possibly help you to see where the city is going, and also its job opportunities. for persons in your context. So, Dr. Coleman, I thank you for yielding to me for just a few minutes, and I yield back to you.
All right. Powerful stuff, everybody. Absolutely powerful. What do you think about what Dr. Campbell just said? Anybody give feedback to just that point that he just raised?
Dr. Coleman, if I can. And this is Stephen Scott. I'm listening and I'm hearing, and Dr. Coleman, you took us forward 100 years. What I would like for us to do is, lest we forget the 100 years of where we come from and where we are today, and how the generations, I want to talk generations. Dr. Campbell, what you were talking about is the generation of the seniors coming into our churches and how we have to mentor to them as we have to mentor to the X, Y, and Z generation. It becomes very systemic to me that as we live today and go forward to that 100 years, Dr. Coleman, we have to accept where we've also come from. Dr. Dixon talked about our history. Dr. Dixon brought in Dr. Martin Luther King and how he attempted to get us to where we are today, and we still not there. What I see is we're having to identify the generations in our churches, and I want to believe that the majority of our urban Danville is that we as from 2020 to now have lost many pastors, and we've lost many churches, and people are just not coming back. But we're having to gravitate to the younger generation and bring them in. My thought here is, how do we go about elevating to them so that they may be able to come and understand the injustice, not only in the church, but in the state? Thank you, Dr. Coleman.
All right, to be Dr. Scott, you were walking heavy for a minute there, Doc. I like that. Camelia, what you want to say?
Dr. Coleman, my burden is, and always has been, even in full gospel as the bishop of small churches, is what is the plan for the small church? Who don't have the people, the people to have all of these committees and persons attached to all of these things. What's the plan for them? How should they operate? What should they do? Because most of the plans we get are for our churches who are large churches, who have the people that can do all of these things.
I'll entertain that question if you'd be so kind, Dr. Coleman.
Go right ahead.
I would say, do what you can do. Listen, this is another point that I do not quite understand. When we talk about build bridges and not walls, the construction piece, how many of you, let me ask this question, how many of you go to your city council meeting? How many of you go to the school board meeting? How many times do you see, what do you see that the SCLC in your community is doing? What do you see the NAACP is doing? Do they have a voice? So that's about 5 questions I just want to ask. Do you go to the city council meetings? Do you go to the school board meetings? Do you make yourself available for some of these things that are happening in your community?
Okay.
And one thing you can do too, Dr. Gamillion, maybe you can partner with other churches. Like there may be slightly larger churches that may have members that are going to these meetings. And maybe you can get together and, divide and conquer. If you can't cover it at your church, maybe you can partner with another church, and you can spread the responsibilities and then communicate one with another and get the word back. Yeah.
Yeah, I like that. Yeah, somebody else wanted to say, go right ahead.
Yeah, that's Rasco. That's Rasco, Dr. Coleman. I agree. I agree with what Dr. Campbell said. Do what you can do, and I'm in the community. I go to just about everything because we're in the heart of East Baltimore. One of the things that, and our church is pretty large as far as building, but not in numbers. And as far as people who are going to do the work, you can put it out there, but you have very few people that will really participate or go to these meetings to try to find out what's actually going on. So that kind of makes the pastor to kind of do a lot of these things. So you can't really delegate because you don't have the people to delegate. And so that forces me to do what I can do and try to connect. Now, one of the things that is a struggle here is that there are several churches that are large that are really connected to a lot of those people in our area, but they don't necessarily share the resources. You know, we find out things after the fact. We find out things after the fact. For instance, there was a grant for most of our Black churches here in Baltimore that would provide monies for security for your churches. Some of the churches got it, but most of the churches that got it were the Hebrew congregations, those type of folks. And you could have received up to $80,000. And so many of the pastors, the Black pastors in our community, were not aware. And the ones that were aware of the situation, they did not make that information shareable for the rest of us. So yes, I'm really like Dr. Campbell said, do what you can do, and once you've done what you can do, then of course the Lord is going to always do the rest. We put one foot in front of the other, and that's what I found. I do what I can do, and I be involved, and even in with the agenda as far as we had the shooting at Morgan State. And me being a part of the chaplaincy programs, we sent chaplains over there yesterday to do the prayer. And so you had different people, in all communities, the white community, the Black community, and, just do what you can do, and God will do the rest.
Dr. Coleman, before we move on, I want to ask my dear brother, how did you feel that it was posted? I think it was on Fox Network, about 13 schools in Baltimore in reference to SOL testing and the math, them not being up to par. How did you feel when you were hearing this kind of information on national television? I know we're all going through that struggle, SOL testing, etc. But I just want to hear your perspective since you're in Baltimore.
Right. Well, I cringed when I heard that, number one, but then it's of course it's embarrassing because I feel like we're in a climate here in Baltimore where it seems like everyone is just doing the bare minimum, just enough just to get by. There's no real urgency for our students to have the proper education or training. And then, we have parents that have, as someone just posted, small mind, small way of thinking. They only show up to the schools when little Johnny has been affected or they felt like a teacher had chastised them. They show up for those type of things. But when it comes to the reading levels and trying to help them get what they need, it's sad. Even we had a parent that did not have the resources. That was on the news as well, for her son to read beyond a third grade level. He was in the 8th grade and he could only read at the 3rd grade level. And when she kept coming on the news, one particular Fox 45, she kept putting her story on the news, Sylvan Learning, which is, I believe, this backed by white people. They actually provided the resources for her. Now, all of this money that we have in our Black communities to be able to provide some of this stuff for our children, we're not offering that. We some of us are just worrying about the biggest churches, but we're not investing these things back into the communities to be able to invest in our children so that those reading levels and those math levels, can come up to par where they need to be. So yeah, I heard it and I cringed and it made me sick to the core. And my son right now, we took him out of public school. I have nothing wrong with public school, but we put him in a Christian-based school, and it's costing a little bit of money, but I'd rather make that sacrifice so that he gets all that he needs, and so that he had a good understanding of how 2 + 2 = 4, and how, you know, and how he needs to read. So yeah, Dr. Campbell, it cringed, but there are others of us from Baltimore as well, and I guess, you know, they share my feelings.
Dr. Coleman, I'm going to yield back to you, but I just want to say this. Just since 10 o'clock, us being on this colloquium 4, I've had to mute. I've had 4 persons to call here at the church and asking for help for their utility bill. 4. Did I say to them, we don't have any funds available? Did I say to them, we don't have a benevolent fund? Here's the good news. There are 4 agencies right now that will help with utility bills. How do I know that? Because I'm in the community, building bridges and not walls. If you just stay in the 4 walls of your context, you're not going to hit the mass of persons that need assistance. That's what I'm talking about. Not the church work, but the work of the church. Thank you, Dr. Cole.
But Dr. Campbell, I'm gonna say this and I'm done. One of the problems that I see, we have a lot of churches here in Baltimore on every corner, like 2 and 3, 4, and then we have funeral homes, which I work for one part-time. Here's the thing that I see with most of these churches: they don't have relational equity in the community. You have to have relational equity in the community. It cannot be just a building with the name scrolling across and, you know, your order of service. You have to have some type of relational equity in the community so that people know what you do beyond those 4 walls.
And in our case, I know a lot of our people live in surrounding counties. They don't live in the city proper of Fredericksburg. You know, we're a bedroom community. A lot of people commute, go to DC area. They don't feel that they have a lot of time once they get home to go to these evening meetings. But one thing I can say, as a result of my project, even though I don't live in the city of Fredericksburg proper, I did go to my first school board meeting and was able to find out how we could partner, our church could partner with the school system. And we've also assigned people to go to city council meetings, our local neighborhood that we're in, the Mayfield Civic Association meeting. And I'm happy to say that that was all a result of me attending VUL, selecting a project that had to do with outreach, and getting my church behind doing outreach similar to what Dr. Campbell is talking about. But our challenge is getting more residents of the city of Fredericksburg to attend our church because, you know, they live there in the community. Not just how what they're doing in the city is affecting the church, but how the city of Fredericksburg is affecting their neighborhood. So that's what we are pushing toward. But thank you, Dr. Campbell, for your work.
Excellent to be, Dr. Thornton, all of you. Now listen, it is 11:15 and we're supposed to give you a 5-minute break. You're probably not gonna get full 5 minutes because our next presenter is already in waiting for us to start at 11:20. But Gamelia, good question you raised about the rural piece. I know that Dr. James Dixon has joined us and we often talk about kingdom. And I think when we begin to have a greater appreciation for kingdom, these silos that we can get in based upon rural or urban or suburban or exurban goes away. And we begin to start thinking about how we take care of the territory. And so if it's rural territory, urban territory, suburban territory, wherever it is, we have a way of coming together and figuring out, large or small, what needs to be done to cover our kingdom or God's kingdom in the way it should be. Lastly, let me leave you with these words of Vernon Johns, a great student, professor, president of Virginia University of Lynchburg, iconic. in his contributions to social justice, so much so that Taylor Branch in his Pulitzer Prize winning book, Parting the Water, says that Vernon Johns was the forerunner of the civil rights movement. He said, you can judge the caliber of mind that you are dealing with by the weight and bent of his questions. The very stupid raise few questions and accept whatever is said to them without any probing. The most eventful hour in the history of the human race was the day that someone invented the question mark. Until then, everyone was practically a yes man or a yes woman. Take 2 or 3 minutes after Dr. Susan Johnson Cook gives her presentation. I want to see us do an effective job. Likewise with Dr. Flake. Tomorrow with Dr. Wilmington. Ask questions. It enhances you and enhances your environment. Take a couple of minutes and we'll get started promptly at 11:20. Didn't get to talk. I'm going to talk about liberty.
Dr. Campbell, I have a question. I saw yesterday where, and you may have heard it on the news too, or probably have heard it, where they found that state governments were shortchanging historical Black colleges and universities. Mm-hmm. And they were being shortchanged out of billions of dollars. And there were a lot of Southern states there, Jackson State being one. So has that come across is there awareness there? And I don't know if Virginia was on the list though.
Virginia wasn't on the list, but it is an awareness.
Mm-hmm.
And so that is the reason why colleges need lobbyists. Mm-hmm. To make sure that you're in the loop of things. If you can remember, the governor some time ago, for those of you that are not a part of the Commonwealth, we have 5 HBCU schools in the state of Virginia: Virginia Union, Virginia State, Norfolk State, Hampton, and VUL. And the governor was giving millions of dollars to HBCU schools. We were left out. Oh. The other 4, they got their bag, but for some reason, VUL was left out. And right. So that's another piece in reference to building bridges and not walls. Mm-hmm. And so you're on point.
Right. Virginia Union didn't get the bag either.
Because, that was the first time I'd ever heard that. A lot of times the news, they would make you think that the colleges are having issues because of financial mismanagement, students not paying loans. And I'm sure that's across the board, white and Black universities. But if you don't get what you are due, you're starting behind. And so, they would blame the school, but there's a lot of inequities that are going on. So I was encouraged that they were even reporting that.
Yeah, I saw that same article, and it was talking about the one I saw was Tennessee State University, where they have shortchanged. The state has shortchanged Tennessee University about $2.1 billion. The money has been going to the state, but the state has not been allocating the money to the university. And that they had plans of open a pharmaceutical school and things of that nature, and they couldn't do it because they were not getting the funds. So now they are being Crump is trying to sue them to get their money back so they can build what they need to build on the campus.
Excellent point. Dr. Coleman.
All right, thank you. We're gonna get started now. Dr. Morton, is Dr. Cook with us?
She is coming in right now, Dr. Coleman.
All right. Dr. Dixon, we're so thankful to have you with us this morning.
Glad to be here, Dr. Coleman, and to all of you. I know lecture is about to start, but let me just say, nationwide, HBCUs are historically underfunded. That's a part of the structural racism that we talked about the other day. The American racism enterprise is designed to deprive our institutions for higher learning and lower learning even of the necessary resources to compete. But what we don't have is a united ecclesiastical collaborative working on social justice issues to demand that these state governments do what they're supposed to do. That's why state rights is always a part of the advocacy of the conservatives, because if they can continue to deprive our universities and our schools of resources, there's no way you can compete. They want us to think it's a lack of competence and a lack of character, but it's a lack of capital. It's a lack of capital. It's not competence, it's not character, it's a lack of capital.
Excellent. Keep those thoughts, such incisive thoughts for us. Thank you, Dr. Dixon. We're ready now to start our next session, and a true friend of Virginia University of Lynchburg, in fact, a true friend to America. Dr. Susan Johnson Cook is probably one of the most meaningful voices that this nation has had the privilege to hear in the 20th and 21st century. Named by Ebony Magazine as one of the top 15 women in ministry in our nation, an individual who has had the privilege to speak on almost every platform in our nation. She is an individual that is so humble that she'd get a call from us and say, I'll come and I'll share to your students. So significant as a theologian, a pastor, an author, an activist, an academician, that President Bill Clinton tapped her in his administration as an ambassador for international religious freedom and worked with several others within that outfit. Well educated and well prepared. Could you put your hands together and help say hi to Ambassador Sujay as she leaves us today? Ambassador, we're honored to have you. The floor is yours.
Thank you, Dr. Coleman, and to my brothers and sisters, I greet you with Jesus' joy this morning. It is exciting to be with you, and it was my honor to be asked. So thank you so much for the invitation. Thank you for what your university means to so many of us, that we will have an opportunity to learn and to be exposed and to expand our horizons. So thank you for the invitation. If you won't mind, I would just love to begin with a word of prayer. As we begin today, Lord, we thank you for this day your hands have made, for these your students who are learning and yearning to know more about you, how we can collectively and collaboratively work together and be united to fight for what is right. We ask your blessings upon their open-mindedness, that you will take us to places we never thought of and do with us things we never thought we could do. So we yield, we open our hearts, we give you our hearts today, waiting for assignments, anointing, and appointing. In Jesus' name, amen.
Amen.
So, good morning. It's so great to be with you. And I'm bringing you greetings today from New York. I'm out in the Eastern Long Island, New York. I'm a native New Yorker. But I kind of live up and down the East Coast. I tell people I live on Amtrak. I'm between New York. I'm on a lot of trains, and last week a lot of planes. So I'm just glad to be alive, as they say today, and in the land of the living. I wanted to share, and I did a PowerPoint. I'm going to ask Dr. Coleman if he will share the screen and run it from your place, and I can just kind of say next slide, next slide. But I wanted to kind of do it. Okay, this is wonderful. Wonderful. So I want to do kind of a pictorial. That's not mine. Okay, there.
It's good.
Okay, okay. I like to swim. I love the water, but that's not mine. So I want to kind of do a pictorial lecture today. It's based on my life, and there's series of structural, systemic racism and sexism and classism that I've had to endure, colorism. So all of the isms. And so when we talk about social justice, I come from a perspective that is unique. As Dr. Coleman says, I've been able to be at certain tables, but so have many of you. And what has been most important to me is not just to get there, but to, number one, make this is my theme: make your moves, make your impact, and make your money. And so to get to the tables, you like that? Give me credit. I heard somebody say, "Ooh, write it down," but give me credit. But it's to really
say it one more time. Say it one more time.
Make your moves, make your mark, make your money. And that's my theme for 2023, with all of the ministries, the businesses, the people I touch and minister to and lecture with. It is to really now make a difference, and make a difference. And so I'm going to share my story in a pictorial way. And then at the end, we'll have questions and answers. And I'd love to hear from you. I love engagement. And so please no question is off the record. And so I want you to be able to free. So you're talking about bridges. A bridge is a structure built to create a path over an obstacle. And so today I want you to, just as your subtitle, say, we're going somewhere. Next slide, please. So this is my presentation to you. My full title is Reverend Dr. Ambassador Susan Johnson Cook. So Reverend is the highest anointing from the Lord. Doctor is an earned degree. I did my DMin at United Theological Seminary in Dayton, Ohio. I was the first Sam Proctor Fellows class. So I had Dr. Jeremiah Wright. I had Dr. Johnny Youngblood, Bishop Jeff Leaf, Frank Reed, Bishop Frank Reed, Otis Moss, the dad, and it was just an amazing class. So I was the only female in that class. 91, we completed our DMins, but it was just so amazing to sit at the feet of Dr. Samuel Proctor, who was brilliant and humorous, and to sit amongst the brothers who are now our leaders in our nation in the faith world. So this picture to the left is just very recent. I run a group called Black Women in Ministry. We got $1 million grant from the Lilly Endowment, and it's the first group of Black women senior pastors who can mentor an entire group of Black women coming into ministry. And so we are together as a cohort, and we were honored together on April 13th at Morehouse College of Laity and Preachers, Dr. Edward Carter, who's just phenomenal. And three of us who are social justice leaders got our portraits hung in the International Hall of Fame. So there I am with the red. Next to me is Dr. Jeremiah Wright, my classmate. And next to him is Dr. Ivor Carruthers, who many of you may know from the Samuel D. Proctor Conference. And then above us is Abraham Lincoln, who is noted to be the first to help free African Americans from enslavement. But to his left is another person who you may not know. He is the president of the Latter-day Saints. And he also that night had his portraiture hung. As we go further, these names are going to make a difference, because I wanted you to kind of see a landscape of what possibilities are in terms of where God places us. So my mantra is, I call myself a FED, a faith leader, an entrepreneur, and a diplomat. And I can walk in all three lanes, and through is misspelled there. I can walk in all three lanes. And so there doesn't always have to be one way or one approach to how God is going to use you. And so I wanted to just make sure my particular brand, I build bridges through faith, through the arts, through diplomacy, and through business, entrepreneurship. I'm a third-generation Black woman business owner. My mother has the longest running Black family-owned business in New York City now. It's in its 64th year. and it's in hands now, fourth generation hands. And so business is very important to me, and that's going to be part of our discussion also in terms of how we go forward with social justice. Next slide, please, Dr. Coleman. So this is a bridge, and a bridge has something on either side of it. Usually you can see one side of it, but you're not always sure where the bridge is going. So bridges have different landing places, but they always are a connector. And that's a word I want us to remember. We talked about collaboration and character, but I want us to remember connections and connectors. Next slide, please, Dr. Coleman. So I'm born into the civil rights movement. I'm a civil rights baby. I'm now a boomer. I got my first Social Security check last month. I'm like, wow. So I'm born in 57. My parents were Southern sharecroppers in this generation. My mother from North Carolina, my dad from Petersburg, Virginia. And they moved north, and on their first day in New York, met each other, married. So they were civil servants by day, and they were business owners building this business I just shared with you at night. And so I have the northern southern experience, born into New York, but went south every summer. And so I was very much part of the civil rights movement. It was meeting in Harlem. A lot of the meetings were in Harlem at Abyssinian Baptist Church. My parents marched on Washington. And so the children, we were part of freedom schools. We learned the freedom songs, and we watched our parents on this black and white TV as they marched on Washington and tried to find and pick them out. They marched alongside Jewish partners. People who taught with my mother in the public school system were Jewish teachers. People who worked with my dad in his civil servant career were of all persuasions, because we're in New York City, have 104 different ethnicities. And so the diversity has always been part of my life. So I'm born into a civil rights movement. I was in that era where every living room had a picture of JFK, MLK, and Bobby. You know, that was the picture on every Black person's home, particularly in the South. And so those were the people I read about. Those were the people that were in front of us as TV was, you know, coming into really prominence. Those were the people that I saw. My parents developed this library. My mother, being a school teacher in New York City, bought all of these Black books before Black books were popular. And so we had this Negro encyclopedia, which was sold to us by Dr. Wyatt T. Walker, the late Dr. Wyatt T. Walker. And then we had all these books by Martin Luther King. And I was fascinated, like a second and third grader, as much as I could comprehend and read. I was reading letters from a Birmingham jail, and where do we go from here? And so it was part of my spirit. I got excited. Third grade, my parents took us to Hunter College, and in the auditorium was Dr. King and Mrs. Coretta Scott King. And we didn't have security like we do now. So she bent over, and I told her, thank you, may I have your address? And I sent her a thank you note. She wrote back to this third grader, thank you for your thank you note. And it was from 234 Sunset Avenue in Atlanta, Georgia. Fast forward, next slide, please. I become best friends with her eldest daughter, Yolanda. And so she says, Sujay is my other daughter. And so I become an adopted daughter of a civil rights icon, best friends with a civil rights daughter. And so my life kind of changed in terms of who I was introduced to, because when you come in the room with Mrs. King, you come into the room. And so this was at the first night when I became president of the Hampton Ministers Conference, first woman. And so this is 2002. We took this picture in the green room. Important because as I'm taking the stage, so as I was coming, I invite Yolanda to come and be with me, you know, as my BFF, my best friend, kind of come stand with me. You know, this is a new moment. And so she says, of course. I get a call and she says, mother says she wants to come too. And I was like, really? And so Mrs. King says, yeah, Sujay, I'm coming. So then I get a call from Dr. Dorothy Height. She says, you're not inviting me? And I was like, Dr. Height, you want to come? And so I have Dr. Height, Mrs. King, and then Carol Mosley Braun had just finished her senatorial race. And she said, well, I'm gonna be there too. So we come out on the stage and they precede me. And it's this moment in history that you're like, God, only you can do this. Like, you can't plan this. And so that was part of my extended family, Mrs. King and Yolanda. Next slide, please. So while I'm in New York City, I become the first Black woman in an American Baptist church to be called to Mariners Temple Baptist Church. It was the oldest Baptist church, American Baptist church in New York City. In New York, I'm trying to do it so you could, in New York, at the end of Manhattan, it comes to like a point, the point being the south of Manhattan. And in that, there's Wall Street, there's City Hall, where all of the mayors and city agencies are. There's the police headquarters, there's Chinatown, and then there's corporate America. So we have like all of these different configurations all within this triangle. My church was right in the middle of that triangle. So I'm a Black church in Chinatown. I was like, God, you know, I passed all of these churches in Harlem and in Brooklyn, and you give me Chinatown. Well, there were 15 people in a building that held 1,100 people, and they were all senior citizens. So I said, I got to do something, you know. So my members lived a block away. They mainly were in housing projects. They were poor. They weren't even considered, in those days, they called them the underclass. They didn't even give them a class system. So you begin to see economic injustice because you see how people are treated so differently. I'm coming from a middle class America, and I'm seeing people who have to scramble every day just to stay alive, put the man out of your house because welfare is coming and you can't get your welfare check. So all of those things that I begin to see in terms of an economic, environmental racism, all of those things. But so I said, I've got to do something. We don't have any money. We got 15 senior citizens. So my late brother had been an assemblyman in New York State. And so we used to do door to door back then. We didn't have technology. We knock on doors, we stand at subways and invite people to vote for us. So I took those same techniques. I went into the projects, I knocked on doors, I stood at the subways, and I came up with this thing called lunch hour of power. And so as people were coming by the hundreds out of the subway, I said, you know, we got this church a block away. Can you come at lunchtime? Long story short, in 6 months, we had over 1,000 people, standing room only, at lunchtime. And that's what put us on the map. So in the front row were people who were part of the police commissioner's team. They were they were deputy commissioners. And they would sit in the front row, some in uniform and some not. And they went back to the commissioner and they said, you know, she's our Wednesday pastor, so make her chaplain. I didn't know there were chaplains for New York City. I didn't know there were paid chaplains for New York City. So the first Black commissioner says, yes, I will make her chaplain. So I had the credentials, I had the experience. I was 26 and I was then breaking into an all-white male, Irish, Italian, Catholic mob is probably the best word. And so they kind of looked at me like, you're not getting in. We don't care who appoints you. You know, we've been here. You have to kiss our ring and kiss whatever else you want. And I was like, nope, get ready. I'm here. And so that then opened up the city to me. We come in at the rank of inspector. So anytime there's something in the police department, we are in the VIP room with the mayor, with whoever the city agencies and leaders are, congresspersons who come to funerals. And so that began a situation where I began to see systemic racism in a way that I had never experienced it before. I had experienced it in school, of course, as many Black children do in white schools. In neighborhoods for the most part, but my parents having a business allowed us to have a level of respect because we were economically equal. But then I go into a system called the New York City Police Department, 50,000 people, the largest police force in the nation. And I'm faced with first the chaplains who are like, you're not coming in. But then the cases that would come before me would be like Black police officers who got hurt in the line of duty, just like a white police officer, but they would only get half their pay, and the white officer would get 3/4 of their pay. And so I would have grown Black men coming in my office crying and saying it's just not right, and having to fight unions and having to fight, you know, just the powers that be to get them what was rightfully theirs, and many times being successful. I also had access to the police commissioner, and now police commissioners changed every 2 or 3 years, but we stayed on. And so because of our rank, we had carte blanche entree to the police commissioners. It becomes important because the Amadou Diallo case comes up during that time where I was appointed. And Amadou Diallo was an African immigrant who came to the Bronx, and he was going into his pocket to reach for his wallet, and some officers said stop, and they shot him 21 times. It was the first like huge case that got media, not that it was the first time it happened to Black people. And so Reverend Al Sharpton, Earl Graves, who was the head of Black Enterprise, Reverend W. Franklin Richardson, all of the major forces of Black America who were in New York City began to march. And it was our strike. It was the first Northern march I had really seen in terms of New York City. And it becomes important because Reverend Al and I had this discussion, because people were like, you're not gonna march with them, you know, suggesting like you're the Uncle Tom, you gonna stay inside. And Reverend Al and I had this discussion because some need to put the pressure and apply the pressure from outside. They marched so that I could have a seat inside. So you have to use both of them are important, because I can go to the commissioner and I can begin to talk about what we got to do with community relations and Black issues and justice. And so both were important. And I remember Reverend Allen saying, you know, no, you do what you do. That's your lane, and I'll do what I'll do, and we're not going to stop. Understand that. And many times he and I were not at the same table, but we had the same cause. And so I want you to understand that. So collaboration, confidence is important, connections are important, but also understanding your cause. There can be a common cause coming from many different directions. An octopus has 8 arms, but it's still connected to one body. You like that too? Oh, write that down. Give me credit for that too. S-U-Z-A-N is how I spell my name. Okay, let's go to the next slide, please. So now I apply so now I've been chaplain for the police department. I'm still pastoring. I get a 1 year, okay, this is one point. So I burn out in my 7th year. So I started 26, by 32 or 3, I am like severely burnt out. You know, I have put no boundaries. I'm doing all these things I just described to you. And the Lord gave me a gift of a sabbatical up at Harvard University. And while I walked around that Charles River where I lived every day, they gave me housing, they gave me salary, the whole thing. The Lord gave me the scripture, he leads me beside the still waters and restoreth my soul. So as we are marching, as we are fighting social injustice, as we are pastoring, as we are leading, however our gifting and assignment is, I want you to do self-care and what I call soul care. So what would it profit a man or woman to gain this whole world, to gain every march, to be at every march, and then lose your soul, lose yourself? And that year was so significant for me to come back to understand as a leader how important it is to take time, number 1, for rest and restoration, number 2, for your family and yourself, and number 3, because your thought process and the way the Lord pours into you allows you some time to receive it, digest it, process it, and then act upon it. If you are moving all the time kinetically, then you are just kind of marching, you know, marching without a cause. You're just marching. And so what's very important is that you take time. So I don't remember what it was, 1993, 94. I don't know how many years I've been married in Stipple. I think 10 years at that point. Yeah, it was 10 years. So I applied for what's called the White House Fellowship. It is an amazing 1-year experience for people, I would say between 25 and 40. And it's very competitive. But if you are selected, you are guaranteed to work with either the president, the vice president, or a cabinet secretary. So you may be a little, I don't know how old you are, but make sure young adults who are in your care, under your watch, at least apply for it. Because what it does is a nonpartisan experience where you are working for government. You're not interning. You are working side by side with the president, vice president, or cabinet secretary. You are their White House fellow for the year. And what happens is, no matter who's in the presidency, 44, 45, 34, 35, you are part of the frat of the White House for the rest of your life. We're going to get calls at some point. It may be a crisis. It may be we want to talk to civil rights leaders. It may be we want to talk to Black business leaders. It may be we want you to help select the next class of White House fellows, but it's a point of impact and influence. And that's also important as we talk about social justice. It's not just shouting and calling attention and spotlighting the issues, but who can make a difference in terms of what you're shouting about? Who's on that inside? Like I was with chaplains who can go to the commission and say, we got to have X, Y, Z on this team, on this staff. You got to hire more. This is before diversity and inclusion became a hot thing. This is somebody inside saying, y'all ain't doing right. And I can say it and you can't fire me, and let's do this. So those are kinds of things you have to impact, influence. And so I applied for this White House fellowship, and I'm selected. Out of 2,000, they select 14. And so I'm selected to work with President Bill Clinton. And so at the time I went, 93, 94, President Bill Clinton was into the Black church world. And so he sent me my second week on the job to the National Baptist Convention to be his representative. And from that point on, I became a speechwriter for him, ran with him. I say that particular example because as I left New York to go there, it's from September 1st to August 31st. As I left New York, the National Baptist was getting ready to meet that first week in September. And basically they were like, this is the all boys club, you're not welcome. Well, 2 weeks later, the president sends me as the White House rep, and you have to welcome me. And so I'm saying we have to not only look at racism and systemic racism and structural racism, but we as a people also have to look at sexism. Like, we're talking about everybody else letting us in or making sure we're in at the table, but we got to make sure sisters are walking beside us. Otherwise, we're just as incorrect as anybody else. So I end up being a faith advisor for the president. I end up going to cabinet secretary meetings with him. So my first week on the job, his cabinets, all of his cabinet secretaries come into this room. Well, he's just made Lee P. Brown the first drug czar of America. Lee P. Brown was the commissioner who appointed me as chaplain. And so now he comes into the room and he kisses me, and President Clinton's like, you know her? And so we have this exchange. He's like, well, I gave her a job. He said, well, I gave her a job before you. And so now I am sitting literally every week with cabinet secretaries. So at my last week, in comes Secretary Cisneros, who was then the HUD secretary. And he says, I made a commitment to the president that I was going to find someone who understood the faith community and who understood government. And he said, I just left Harvard Divinity School where you just were. And so I want to ask you if you can stay another year. And so we developed what was the first faith-based initiatives, although we didn't call it that, but he wanted to make government user-friendly because he knew like the people like B'nai B'rith in the Catholic Church and Temple Sinai, B'nai B'rith could all get those grants. And there's lots of government money. But the churches like that we pastor and the associations we pastored never even knew about it. And so again, that word connections, what rooms to walk into, when can you walk in a room, can you make a difference in the room? All of that is important for our subject. So this is a picture of me praying with the president as his faith advisor in the Oval Office. Next slide, please, Dr. Coleman. So fast forward, President Clinton moves to New York after his presidency, asked me to help his wife, who was the former First Lady, to run for Senate and introduce her to the faith community, which I did. But I was like, you know, what, you want me to introduce you to my people, but also we want to make sure you're accountable to the faith community. It's not just an election thing. She becomes senator. Then, of course, he asked me to help her to run for president. We don't know Barack Obama at this point. She's our New York senator. People are like, Barack Obama, we can't even pronounce his name. He's going to come from Chicago, this little young guy. Then he wins. And so I'm sure that I'm not going to get any kind of appointment now because everybody has their people. President Clinton had me as one of his people. President Obama didn't know me. Well, he makes Hillary Clinton Secretary of State, and she calls me and says, I know your political experience, I know your faith experience, do you have any international experience? So the next C I want to leave with you is cultural, that to be on top of your connections, to be on top of your culture. So I had lived kind of overseas from 10th grade, Spain, Africa, all of these places. So I send her over this list and she says, we've got this position called U.S. Ambassador at Large for International Religious Freedom. So when President Obama comes in, I'm on this prayer call with him with other faith leaders. So I get to pray with him on his first day in the office. Dr. Coleman, the next slide, please. So then I get this call from Secretary Clinton's office. We want you to be our nominee for the U.S. Ambassador. You can go to the next slide, for International Religious Freedom. So I am now, all ambassadors have to be nominated by the secretary. So you come through the State Department and you have to be appointed by the President of the United States. They created this position in 1998 when President Bill Clinton was president. Madeleine Albright was Secretary of State. The conservatives built this position in to have a position for conservatives, white male evangelicals, because their issue is international religious freedom. When we hear religious freedom in the papers now in the headlines, they're talking about things like abortion and all of those things that are on the US side. I had 199 countries, every country except the United States. And what my portfolio was to make sure that, if you can go to the next slide, please. The next slide is fine. One more. So it opened up new waters. So my information for all of you was that this D-Min is supposed, the first stage was supposed to empower, equip, and that you're to embrace. And I want to add another E, and I'm going to say enlarge your territory. Because what this bridge did was take—
I like that. I like that.
Dr. Coleman, you like it all. I love it. I'm loving your energy. But enlarge your territory. So the bridge that I showed right before this says new waters. Because when you are in now I'm a diplomat for the United States. And I am representing the President and the Secretary of State at the diplomatic table. Now, you don't just get there. You have to be Senate confirmed, which is a whole process. It took me 1.5 years to get Senate confirmed. They grill you. We saw Ketanji Brown Jackson when she was becoming Supreme Court Justice. Her hearings were hard. These are even harder because the conservatives have so much money at stake that they're going to try to prevent someone who doesn't have their interests from getting in. And so they sit on the Senate Foreign Relations Committee, just like liberals sit on the Senate Foreign Relations Committee. And so it takes one vote to stop you. And so my first hearing, they stopped me. But in between the first and the second hearing, the Lord blessed me with a white evangelical pastor. And we're going to talk about that in a little while. But enlarge your territory. So you get new partners, you're in new waters, which means there's some new partnerships, some new collaboration, and you have a new worldview. You know, Isaiah the prophet said, you know, it was when King Uzziah died. I was all in this world with King Uzziah. And so I had everything. He says, but it was when he died that my eyes opened, that I began to see things that were larger than just King Uzziah. I saw the Lord, and the Lord showed me a vision of beyond King Uzziah. And that's what we have to pray for as activists of faith, as justice marchers for faith, that we see things that the Lord would have us to see that we couldn't see from our silos, they call it, or from our myopic view, but the Lord gives us a larger view. And so I wear glasses because without the glasses, I can only see a certain amount of things in a certain way. But with the glasses on, I'm able to see clearly. And what God does is he puts these spiritual glasses on us to open our eyes, to open our hearts, to open our minds to a new worldview. Say new worldview, wherever you are.
New worldview. You killing me. New worldview. This is great.
So 3 scriptures I took with me on the road. I was in places I had not been. You know, I had toured with Bishop Jakes. I had been, you know, Hampton Ministers president, but none of those persons who I respect dearly were able to help me in this world. So I had to have new people who grilled me and tutored me to go in front of the Senate Foreign Relations Committee and told me the politics and the policies and what I was really facing. I was facing what we call religious wars all over the zone, all over the world. New partners, new collaboration, new worldview. So the first part of the enlargement was Isaiah 54:2. Lord, enlarge the place of my tent. Stretch forth the curtains of your habitations, the places where you live, stretch it even farther, because you live here, but you got to stretch it even farther. When you have a tent, the farther you stretch it, the more room you have. Spare not, lengthen thy cords, and strengthen thy stakes. So I have this thing, stretch, enlarge, empower, and dig deep. So think about seeding your new place that you're going. Stretch, enlarge, empower, and dig deep so that you are expanding. That's the next E. You're expanding where the Lord is allowing you to go. Or the Lord is expanding and he's asking you to walk in the places that he's expanded for you and prepared for you. First Chronicles 4:10, it's normally called the Jabez prayer, but I found a version. I couldn't find it last night. It was not the Message Bible and it was not the Contemporary English Bible, but it was a version I found that said, Lord, increase my opportunities, territories, that I may touch more lives for you so that you get more glory.
That's rich.
That was the scripture I took on the road with me. It was like, this ain't about me. I could never even have imagined this. But because the Lord has opened up the whole globe, 199 countries are in my portfolio. Lord, I can't do this on my own, not by might, not by power, not even by all the government stuff that's upon me, but I need you. It's by my spirit, says the Lord. Because the racism, the systemic racism that happens when you come to this level, we always say the higher level, the more devils. You have not seen systemic racism until you go to the State Department, because you're talking about the entire world is at stake. You're talking about people who've lived their whole lives wanting to be foreign service officers just so that they could go sometimes and dominate a country. You're talking about a United States that says, okay, Africa, come over here, Gambia, depend on us. We'll give you money to build this, build this, build this. But if you don't act right, we put sanctions on you, which means we snatch the money back that we just gave you, or you can't spend the money. And so you begin to see powers and principalities. You see people who are upset with Obama, but they can't get to him. But I'm the next Black person that they're close to, so they set you up for failure. And I'm exposed to all of these different religions. It's not to go around the world to help just Christians. It's the right for anyone to believe what they want, wherever they are, and not be persecuted because I want to be a Muslim, or because I want to be a Christian, or because I want to be a Buddhist. So you have witches or agnostics or atheists. So you have all of these kind of daggers, which is spiritual warfare. And so you have to be careful what you're marching into. And so I would say the next thing is have a prayer circle. I'm sure your prayer life is great, but have a prayer circle who does nothing but cover you in prayer. That's my next C, be covered in prayer. Because there are sometimes the evil with whatever we're facing is so thick that you can't cut it by yourself. And you need to protect your heart. You need to protect your soul. You need to protect your family. And so you need to have someone who covers you night and day. And then you're traveling. I'm in a plane every week overseas, over the Indian Ocean, over all of these places where we hear planes going down every week. And so you want to be covered. And the third scripture I took was Ezekiel 3, 5, and 6, which says, I will send you to foreign nations and they will listen to you. So you don't have to ask God, are you sure? No, you got to go with the confidence that, yeah, God said, yeah, I placed you here. I'm not second guessing this thing. And so you can't take any time doubting, like, am I in the right place? Did I make, Once you say yes, you say yes. And you go forth with everything that entails. Next slide, please. So international religious freedom, as I told you, is everything in the world. So the United Nations had this thing in I forgot the year, it was 1956, I believe, called the Universal Declaration of Human Rights. And what that means is it's the right for, and you can look it up, this is small type here, but it basically means the right for anyone in the world to be able to worship, express their worship, meaning wear their crosses, their attire, their hijab, as they want without persecution. And all the nations in the world signed on to this. And so my job was to go to the nations where they weren't honoring it, pretty much. You know, the places that it was going along fine, they didn't send me, but places where Boko Haram in Nigeria was starting up, and sometimes it's coupled with terrorism, in Pakistan where they're killing people for wanting to be Christian. And so those were the places I had to go and have diplomatic relations. And so it's really being on top of the world and making sure that your voice is heard, but it's not your voice, you're carrying the voice of the president. Understanding the assignment is the best way to say it. When you march, when you fight, when you are the spokesperson for, be clear on your assignment. My assignment was not to be the evangelist Billy Graham of the world. So people from the outside looking in like said, yeah, she the faith preacher for Obama. Well, okay, but had nothing to do with that. It was to really face powers and principalities and come back and tell the president and secretary, whatever the mission was from that trip, this is what's going on. And so to be able to understand what your assignment is. So I want you to underline that. If you get nothing else out of this lecture, please. Next slide, please, Dr. Coleman. I want to honor your time. We have 15 minutes. So let's just run through this real quick. So new partners, the BYU Law School, which are Latter-day Saints or Mormons, Columbia School of International Public Affairs. This was a lecture I did at Oxford for the Mormons and also for Notre Dame. Next slide, please. And so this was one of the groupings when we spoke at Oxford today. Okay, let me get back. So I'm standing behind the woman in the red jacket who now has the same position that we fought for London to have. So they call her Special Envoy for Religious Freedom, International Religious Freedom, and her name's Fiona Bruce. But I'm saying in this picture are conservatives. This is the head of, to my right here, where my arrow is the head of the BYU Law School International Religious Freedom Center, and he's a Mormon, and he wants to do partnerships with Black women pastors. Right beside me to my right is the ambassador from Kenya to London. And so all in this are people who don't always look like, sound like, talk like, come from the same countries that we do, new peers, new colleagues, but you've asked the Lord to enlarge your territory. Next slide, please. And we'll run through these. So I want to allow time for you guys to talk. So stay in your God-assigned lane. When I talked about your assignment, understand your assignment. Because if you're worried about what I'm doing or not doing, or coveting what I'm doing, or you think I'm doing, you are missing what God is asking you to do. Next slide, please. So partners for justice come in all shapes, sizes, and colors. When you're asking God to enlarge, expand, and you've got to embrace that there may be a white guy. Next slide. So these are three justice fighters we know from three different walks of life. Hakeem Jeffries to the left, now the minority Speaker of the House. In the middle, Raphael Warnock, my classmate from Union Seminary, who's now a senator. So he fights from where he is. Al Sharpton, we all know Reverend Al. I told you the story about him. All three different places, but the questions they have to ask are, what partnerships, what deals do I have to make, Raphael and Hakeem, to be able to get a vote through? Or what deals am I going to hold back on because it's not appropriate for my people, but they have been elected into a place of office where they can make a difference. So they've got constituents, like the government can't fire them. They've got constituents that they're accountable to. And that's the next word I want to say, accountability. Don't march out there on your own. There's an assignment, there's an appointment, but there's accountability. You are accountable to our people first. And to God first, and then to our people. So don't march out there on your own and say, I got this dream. No, you better make sure you're accountable. Next one. We only have 2 more slides, and then I want to open it up. So in the letter I got from Dr. Coleman, it said the currency for ministry is relationships. Relationships. If there's no other R word you know in life, relationships. So this is a white guy who, when my first confirmation hearing did not hit the Senate floor, and so I did not go through, he said, I felt your heart. He met me at Sylvia's Soul Food Restaurant in Harlem and said, I felt your heart as a Christian sister. And I heard that you were the one President Obama spoke your name to be in this position, so I'm going to fight for you. He introduced me to all the redneck partners of evangelicalism and conservatism. He says, and they're going to take your meeting. And they came in literally with a redneck and they said, there's something about you. I was prepared not to support you, but there's something about you that I'm going to support you. And they taught me politics 101 to the point where Senator Orrin Hatch, the late Senator, he's a Mormon bishop. So he came off the Senate floor to meet with me, not about international religious freedom. He said, I want to pray with you. If you believe God called you to this, I want to pray with you. And you do God's work and I'll take care of the boys. And he did. Next. So this is my best friend in all the world in Washington, D.C. His name is Reverend Rob Shank. We'll talk more about him later, but the currency for ministry is relationships. He stood up to the white boys and said, you got to go through me to get to her. And so we're going to make sure that she gets it. Last 2 slides, real quick. So as I'm doing this assignment last night, this email came up, 8 historic bridges you should cross at least once. And I'm like, how do they know I'm doing about bridges? But basically, these are the 8 top bridges, but each one has its distinction. So it doesn't mean that every bridge is the same. And I want you to get that. Like, you know, a bridge is going to connect you, but not every bridge is the same. Some are suspended, some have things under them, some open up and close. And so I want you to know you have your distinctive mark, your brand that doesn't always have to be done the same way. Next slide, and I think we're almost done. So these are just some of the bridges. They all beautiful, but they all have different functions. Next one, and I think that's almost my last. So I say this as I opened. We can't talk about social justice and structural and systemic racism unless we also deal with women and sexism in our own body. So I came back and I wrote my first article for the Huffington Post was the 3 new R's that America has to deal with, and it's race, religion, and respect for women. And I close on that. I'm a woman. and this is my story. I'm sticking to it. And thank you so much for the opportunity to share with you today. Thank you. God bless.
Speechless because you took us on a narrative, a journey of your own story. Those of you who are starting out and having to write your spiritual autobiography, what she just did, you all ought to send her $1,000 a piece because she just helped you. She just unpacked the splendor of God's activity in her life. You know, our late President Ralph Reeves used to say often that we can only hope to be in the right place with the right people at the right time with the right questions and the right God to say the right thing that will bring the right results to advance our people. Ambassador, you embodied that. So let's open the floor now for questions, please.
And please let me know who you are when you speak. I'd love to just know who you are. Thank you.
Hi, Ambassador. I am Dr. to be Tammy Thornton, and I am fanning out right now because having you here is better than Oprah Winfrey. And I tell you no lie. Years ago, and most of all, I want to thank you because years ago, I started buying your books, probably in the early 2000. I bought my first one, which was Too Blessed to Be Stressed.
Wow.
And then my mom was a part of the Baptist church, Mattapani, and she attended a conference and she bought, even though, you know, I was 30, almost 40 by that time, she would still buy me books because she was a school teacher. And she bought me a number of your books and they were all personally signed.
Wow.
So when I found out you were going to be here, I dusted them off because it's been probably 18 years since they were bought. But I just want to thank you because as a woman minister, and back then, you know, there were mainly men. You know, there are a lot of more women in ministry now. You really gave some great nuggets. And so the question I have for you is, one thing you used to say is, my name is Sanjay and I need a whole month off.
That's how
So I was wondering, that's how you started your book. So I was wondering, do you still take that time, need that time, even though I know probably your sons are grown men now, do you still take that time to yourself? And we had a discussion with Dr. Brock yesterday from Alfred Street Baptist Church. And it became obvious that sometimes women don't support one another. We kind of blame men sometimes on our lack of progress, but sometimes women don't support one another. So have you found that to be true?
And so let me answer so that others get their questions. And let me answer just two questions about support and about whether I take the time. So yeah, I'm doing this we have a beach house out in the East Hamptons. And so I've gotten my life to a point where I spend my entire summer here and the rest of the time in DC or New York. But what I've done is I've put all of my organizations on the same school year calendar. So I'll work from September to end of June, but July and August are mine. So I don't accept stuff. I don't have people, you know, I don't report to anyone. I don't have jobs that I do or clients, whatever. So I'm a beach person. I want to be in shorts and a bathing suit all summer. And that's what feeds my soul. But I also build time in during the year. Joe Ratliff, Pastor Brentwood Baptist in Houston said 1 day a week, 1 week a month, at least 1 month a year. And I remember that from the beginning of my ministry. So I'm very much, after I burn out and wrote Too Blessed to Be Stressed, it doesn't make sense to do it like this, you know? So live. All of the women who started with me as Baptist pastors are deceased. They died much too early. And that's why it became a real issue for me. So I do a retreat for women of faith From all, it's an upscale, you gotta be able to pay, but we go by a sea, it's called Selah by the Sea. Selah from the Bible meaning pause. And we do it every year, and it's a time for 4 days for us to be together, be by the beach, but have some time alone and refresh. And if you don't, you know, you will drop. It will drop. You find the sisters who will support you. I try not to be on the side of where the support is not. I find the sisters and the brothers who support me, and I don't spend time in negative places or with negative people. If I know you don't like me, then you're missing out on me, and so I will go elsewhere. So that's my bottom line. But globalblackwomen.org is my organization that you can find me and get to me, globalblackwomen.org. And the retreat is always June 17th to the 20th of whatever year. And when it's up for next year, it's called Selah by the Sea, and you'll find it on selahbythesea.org. But right now it's not up because we just finished. Okay. Thank you. I think we have time. Dr. Coleman, you tell me what, for 2 more questions or 1 more question? I want to honor your time.
Yeah, we're doing okay. Just keep going.
Okay, cool. So yes.
I've got a question. Let me put my hand down.
Mm-hmm.
Hello, Reverend Dr. Ambassador Cook. This is Jacqueline Gilchrist.
Yes. How are you?
I'm
Yes,
good.
I remember you. Oh my gosh, yes.
Yes. We did sound for many of your events and stuff like that, my husband and I.
You used to shout on the video screen. I know, yes. Praise God. How are you?
I'm doing okay. You have always been a woman of God and that I've always admired. You're the daughter of my retired pastor, Reverend Dr. Robert W. Perry. So I know you well. But I have 2 questions. And one is, where should you start if you never saw yourself making connections with city or state officials because you didn't, think that you had the voice, you didn't have the knowledge or the language to really be in conversation with them? Where would you start in order to begin to make a difference and to build your voice to be heard? That's one question. The second question would be, how did you prepare yourself for ecumenical relationships? Because you're dealing with all types of religion, people from all different backgrounds. How did you prepare yourself to do that as a Baptist preacher? Those are my 2 questions.
Thank you. I'll start with the last one. So as I started out, I'm from New York City. I'm from the Bronx. And so we grew up around every ethnicity. My parents were Black socialites. Every Sunday, there were all kinds of an eclectic group of people in my house, Japanese, Indian. We lived next door to Serbians and Ukrainians and Jamaicans. So, my life was always diverse. And because of that, there were diverse religions that came with that. And so my mother would say, don't sit around, go introduce yourself. So part of it is just being outgoing and not trying to be this wallflower, but having personality. That's a P that I want you gotta have some personality. Don't sit like a wallflower. I don't know how many teenagers, when you sit on the side of the wall and the guy comes to ask you to dance and you still sit there, like, don't be the wallflower. You got to be the one that gets up and says, yeah, I got personality. So I was used to it. I went to a school that was predominantly Jewish. I lived in a neighborhood that was Latino and African-American. And as I said, on my floor in my apartment building were all of these different, and we grew up together as friends, as neighbors, and we were in and out of each other's homes. So for me, it was never uncomfortable. I was never uncomfortable. So I think that God prepares you for each round. So becoming a chaplain, you have to speak for everybody. If a Sikh came to me and said, they don't want me to wear my turban, I have to do religious accommodations for him, just like the Seventh-day Adventists who said, they got me working on Saturday and that's my Sabbath. And so understanding that it's a whole world and everybody has a right. I mean, everyone has a right to what they believe. I know who I believe in, and I think that that's really important to know your faith and be able to stand on that. So I never water it down. I never say, oh God, I don't believe in God. No, I know who I believe. But again, my assignment has been to be comfortable with whomever you grow up with. So I think that's the beginning of it, to expose yourself to different experiences where you're not the only one in the room. You're not just with Baptists. You're not just with people from Union Baptist Church in Stanford. but to go to things. And sometimes you got to invest, whether it's my Selah by the Sea retreat or go to an afternoon something that's happening, but you got to invest. And sometimes you got to travel. I think going to Spain at 14 years old, my parents allowed me to go before they even had their passports and live over there, become bilingual as a Black girl, and then come back to New York City right when the Latinization of New York was happening. I'm translating for my playmates' parents, you know, because they were first generation English speakers. And so I'm saying in Spanish and English to my playmates and their parents, this is how you enter the public school. This is what you're going to find. This is going to be her teacher. This is her homework. This is how we have to check her homework. So I think expanding and being willing to go, because when you go, you grow. And then you have to sow into someone, go, grow, and sow. So that was the first question. The last question. The first one was, number one, you have to know what you want to say, why it is you want to hang out with state or government people. Because not everybody's called to do that. But kind of like why you want to be in that room. Is it that you're fighting for the sanitation of your community, and so you need to be in the room with the council people and people who are over the Department of Sanitation? So you got to understand why you want to be in the room. Every room is not for you. I don't feel like I got to accept every invitation that comes across my inbox. It's kind of, I mean, this is kind of a casual, but like kind of what's in it for me? Why do I need to be in this room? You know, why do I need to accept this invitation? And not that it's arrogant, but I'm not going to travel 6 hours and then you say, well, we can't afford to pay you. No, we negotiate business before and you will pay me because this is how I live. So it's understanding, you know, kind of who you are and your value, and then understanding why you want to be in the room, and then having a mentor yourself who's been in the room that you want to go into, so that you go with them a few times. You're not asking the questions. You're not getting up to the mic and saying, Mr. Council Person or Miss Council Person, you're next to someone who can ask those questions and who you admire. And you say, one day, I want to be able to ask these kind of questions. So I had a mentor for that White House Fellows, and I kind of glassed over it because of time, but there was a white woman out of this church on Fifth Avenue. It's the same church Trump went to. It's called Marble Collegiate. But the pastor said, I have a woman who can help you, Meg Armstrong. And she prepares women who become prime ministers and presidents all over the world. She spent a year with me. What earring are you going to wear? What brooch are you going to wear? How are you going to sit? Because back then you weren't wearing pants. How are you going to sit in this scenario? They invite you to dinner. So when you're turning from your right to your left, do you know which fork to use? Do you know which knife to use? Do you know how to speak with someone and not spit all over them? And she routinely made me go through everything and gave me the questions she thought that they would ask me. So I was rehearsed, I was poised, I looked right, I was prepared, I knew how to walk in the room. But it was a year of someone who worked with me, and I was pretty far along professionally, but I was a pastor, I was a police chaplain, I had not gone into the White House. And there are 3 different worlds that you have to understand. Going to Presidency of Hampton Ministers Conference, you have to know how to dress. You have to know when you're on that stage, you're not coming there in your jeans and sneakers. There was this time I got a chance to be able to choose people, you know, back in the Hampton days, you could choose people who were walking around. You want to read the scripture, you want to do whatever. And I was trying to find a woman. They said, today you can find a woman to read the scripture. And 3 of the women I went to had these overalls, sneakers. They weren't ready for the stage. And I couldn't invite them. So they missed the moment. So all of it is knowing, watching, reading, looking at people who have been where you are trying to go. Say, can I tag along with you a few times? And just sit in the room. I say, listen before you speak and listen more than you speak, so that you don't blow it with the question that was just totally out of line. And they say, who the hell was that? You don't want that. So those are my suggestions. But yes.
Thank you so much. Thank you.
Ambassador, Jackie, yeah, Ambassador, listen, I'm gonna make everybody mad right now. That's what I often do. So we're gonna have to stop.
Okay.
Because we got to go to the next piece.
Sure.
But I want to say, Ambassador, I know that I'm speaking on behalf of everybody, and I'd like for Dr. Mays just to close out this section and Dr. Campbell. But you have been incredible. The way you handle this moment is why you are where you are. And I want you to know that we are praying for you.
Thank you.
That the family here at VUL is here for you any way we can help you. And we only ask, if we're going to treat you right, we want you to come back. And when we can be in person, even do it that way. Let's give it up one more time for this great voice for God. Dr. Mays, Dr. Campbell, and then we'll take a couple of minutes. And by the way, only at VUL will you have Ambassador Susan Johnson Cook and Dr. Elaine Flake all on the same Zoom session because she's already on and ready to go. Mays and then Campbell.
And we're out of the same church in Boston. We all were sat under John Bryant. We were in college, in grad school. So it's amazing how the worlds come together. I'm sorry, and God bless all of you as you prepare.
Freshman. I knew her when she was a college freshman.
That's right. That's right. New Temple singers.
Yes, that's right.
Dr.
And I
Mays,
remember
Dr.
your
Campbell.
Thank you, Dr. Coleman and Ambassador. I personally want to thank you. I remember the years that at the Hampton Ministers Conference, even the year that you was elected as president and served as president. I too, along with Dr. Toby Tammy Thornton, has your books on my shelf. And I appreciate you. Thank you for sharing your personal testimony, and especially my takeaway is marching without a cause. You helped me to understand the reality that whatever I may do, there must be a reason, there must be a cause, and I thank you for that today.
Thank you,
Dr.
sir.
Campbell.
Just to echo what Dr. Mays has said, for me, I would say this. Maya Angelou said, people may not remember what you say or what you do, but they will remember how you make them feel. You have made all of us feel that we have a purpose in life and to be prepared for when we go before the traffic, how to make inroads to make this world a better place. I am so excited for what I've heard. I'm sure I speak for everybody else. And I concur with you, Dr. Coleman. Please, since we have the colloquium in the fall, it will not be the time that she's on the beach. And we certainly would like to get you back.
Thank you so much. It's been my honor, and you're in great hands with Dr. Flake, and God bless you so much. It's been my pleasure. God bless you, soon to be doctors. I hope I see you as doctors soon. Take care.
Let's take a minute break. I hate to do that to you, and we're going to come back for another amazing presentation from Dr. Elaine Flake. Just a little stretch break, if you will. This is an intensive, and this is what we're going to do. All right.
All right. We're going to reconvene, everyone. And I want to thank Dr. Ricardo Brown and the Fifth Baptist Church in Richmond, Virginia, for their collaboration and continued partnership with Virginia University of Lynchburg. And we are so thankful today to have with us another, in my personal opinion, American icon, a general.
Can I hear you, Coleman?
Can anybody hear me, everybody? I don't know.
Now we can.
Okay, now you can. Let me
Now
start
we
over.
can.
Good, let me start over. I want to thank Reverend Ricardo Brown and the Fifth Baptist Church in Richmond, Virginia, for their wonderful partnership that they share collaboratively with Virginia University of Lynchburg, and for making possible the opportunity to benefit from, in my personal opinion, a general in the faith, an American icon in our faith tradition, fondly known of as Reverend Elaine. She is well prepared. In fact, she's so prepared, I'm almost, as the chair of the faculty here, wanting to see if I can talk to her about helping us in so many areas, whether it be her work at Fisk University in English, Boston University, Union Theological Seminary in New York, United Theological Seminary in Dayton. She is an incredible person, celebrated author, and an individual who is impacting so many parts of our society, whether it be as national chaplain of Links Incorporated, or now serving where her beloved husband has served in so many ways. She is now the pastor of that great place where people gather by thousands at the Greater Allen AME Cathedral in New York, so that she can have the full balance of the time. Put your hands together now as we move from one giant to another giant. Thank you, Dr. Elaine Flake, for being with us today. The floor is yours.
Oh boy, thank you so much, Dr. Coleman, and to all who have gathered on this line. What a wonderful experience this has been. I listened in to Reverend Sujay for a few minutes, and I've known her, as I said, for years, but her life certainly is one that God has touched. Before I go into my presentation, I just wanted to just say a little about myself. I am a native of Memphis, Tennessee. I grew up Baptist and ended up, after Fisk, going to Boston University, where I joined St. Paul AME Church. That experience was life-changing for me on so many levels. My mother thought I had been a terrible backslider when I left the Baptist church and went to the AME church. But I think she kind of changed her opinion once she saw that is where not only did I get a new vision for ministry, but that's where I met my husband, and we have just been able to replicate and build off of what we experienced at St. Paul. One of the things that happened to me at that church, and I just think it's so important to talk about, was that I saw ministry in ways that I had never seen it. My little Baptist church in Memphis never fed the hungry. They never, we never had a trans-African kind of perspective. I never knew we should be helping people in Haiti and helping people in the motherland. But it was at St. Paul that I experienced the ministry in ways that I have never had never experienced it. And that was the foundation upon which we built our ministry once we came to New York. It is so critical. It is so very, very, very critical that we understand the length and breadth of ministry and where God is calling us in this hour, especially in this hour, because things have just gotten to be unlike anything I think we've ever seen. And hopefully God can help us navigate navigate these waters. So when we talk about building bridges, one of the things that came to mind was an article that I read the other day that simply stated that among the many problems that plague American society, one of the most painful realities with which we are living in this nation is what some would call an empathy deficit. Empathy, not sympathy, but empathy. Another writer, Brueggemann, says that we are experiencing during this season, God help us, the death of empathy. People all over the nation, or maybe even the world, seem to lack the ability or the desire to care about other people, to truly care and to truly understand what people are going through and what they might be feeling. We get degrees, we are educated, but sometimes that we don't seem to be able to put ourselves in the shoes of other people. We are in an age of entitlement, and it is apparent that people have become so consumed with what they are feeling personally that they cannot consider the feelings or the experiences of other people. They don't take the time and to lean in, and that's what ministry is about. We have to take the time to lean into the lives of others, to ponder what they're going through, to ponder what they are experiencing. And if the truth be told, our ministry and our thought processes should be built on our understanding that we are called to see other people. We're really called to. I remember when I was on the campus of Fisk University, it was apparent to me that a couple of the girls, not many, but a couple of the girls were experiencing abuse at the hand of their boyfriends. I could not imagine it. I couldn't understand it, but it planted a seed in my spirit, so that when I began to do ministry here in New York, one of the first things that I wanted to do was see what this domestic violence experience really meant in the lives of women. And it propelled me to go and do to see if I could provide housing and provide a way of escape for women who have become trapped in toxic relationships. So that seed that was planted when I was a junior or senior at Fisk University was something that was able to develop into a 40-year ministry. In 1983, I just wrote a proposal and said, this is what I want to do. And believe it or not, upon our first submission, we were able to start the Allen Women's Resource Center, which houses women and children and some men who are victims of domestic violence. And that that grew out of my leaning into the experience of women, an experience that I had never had, but one that is a reality. And so the truth is, my sisters and brothers, that we in this season are being called to care about and understand what other people are going through. When you talk about building bridges, building bridges really means that we are connecting to each other so that we can meet each other and we can see each other. We want to care about what other people care about and understand what they are going through, the stresses that they are under, the pain that they feel, the needs that they have. We want people to empathize with us. And I think ministry and building ministry is greater when we get to the point that we can fully empathize with others and really understand who they are and what makes them some of the things, what makes them who they are, and what makes them do some of the things that they do. And you know, it's our responsibility to inquire or maybe to determine what others might need from us. Now, we know that empathy is the ability to understand or share feelings with others. It is the capacity to sense other people's emotions and to imagine what they're going through. Empathy is the move that we make to see and understand what others are feeling and at least try to imagine what another person is going through. And when it comes to ministry, and the hostility that we sometimes experience, gender hostility, denominational hostility, I suggest that it's all because we've not really been able to connect with each other in a very real way, because we have become so ingrained in our way of being that we forget that some people are hostile because of what they've been through. Not that it excuses it, but there is something going on within all of us that people do not, that others may not understand. And so a part of our responsibility as preachers, as faith leaders, is to attack this empathy deficit that is so prevalent in our country. And certainly it has created a racial divide that that has re-emerged in this country in ways that I think we never thought would happen. One study shows that empathy has declined since the presidency of 45 and since the pandemic, says that empathy has declined about 40%. And that certainly means that the whole culture, the whole tenor of American life has declined from a humanistic perspective. The whole tenor of American life has declined. Not only are children more vicious, not only are children more vicious, and the bullying has increased, but teens and young people in this social media world, which we all know has gone crazy. They, you know, the hatred, the disdain that comes across social media is really wreaking havoc in the lives of people in our churches. And unfortunately, we may not even be aware of what they're going through. Educators cannot really identify. Here in New York, most of the educators in our public school system live in the suburbs, and they are of a different hue, and they are trying to educate children whose experience they have no way of understanding. So we're in a terrible season, or a difficult season, not only in New York City but across the nation. Politicians could care less, and we're seeing that stuff played out every day. People just don't care about other people. The disenfranchised people in the districts of that some of them represent are not under their consideration. They just don't care, because all they care about is getting reelected. And so, and even in the church, I see the prejudice and the racism and the intolerance and the narrow-mindedness They not only exist, but they're passed down. Pastors pass them down to their congregants, or ministry leaders pass them down. And we have to understand that, and I think Reverend Johnson alluded to this, the average American does not understand the experiences of other cultures. And this is where we have to go, I believe, as the church. We African Americans have to understand Asians, and Asians need to understand Blacks, and Jamaicans need to understand South Carolinians, and South Carolinians need to understand Trinidadians, because even within the church, there seems to be a tension in many instances around these cultures. And so when we talk about building bridges, we have to remember that as pastors, as I think many of you are, and as leaders, as I know all of you are, we have to continually promote in the hearts and minds and in the souls of our people the understanding that empathy is the door to a humane humanity. That is Helen Rice in her The Empathy Effect says that empathy is the door to a humane humanity. It is the tool of building bridges. It is the tool. Empathy is the tool to building bridges. That means that is the work that we must promote as leaders. Michelle Obama said in her speech at the Democratic Convention in 2020, has become an example of what happens when people shouting in grocery stores. This was the time when we were wearing masks, unwilling to wear masks and keep us safe. America sees people calling the police on folks who are just minding their own business just because of the color of their skin. They see an entitlement that says that certain people belong here, that greed is good and winning is everything, because as long as you come out on top, it doesn't matter what happens to anyone else. And so my sisters and brothers, there is an empathy gap in this nation. There is an empathy gap in our communities. And yes, there is an empathy gap in church. People are going through so much stress and pressure and emotional trauma. And while we're all going through our own stuff, God knows as leaders have are going through. And that has been certainly a challenge, I think, for all of us in this season, because we've been going through so much ourselves. When you think about what ministry looks like today in comparison to what it looked like 5 years ago or before 2020, we have had to struggle, we have had to fight, we've had to reconfigure our whole lives. And one of the things that I found myself guilty of is losing that personal touch, because I'm so absorbed with what I'm doing. I'm living with a 99-year-old mother. I have a husband who's ill. And this has been a difficult season for me on so many levels. That's why I constantly remind myself, and I do apologize for not having a PowerPoint, but I'm just not that tech savvy yet, and I couldn't get it done before today. But please
Dr.
know
Flake,
that
you're doing great.
Okay, well, listen. So 1 Peter 3:8 tells us that we must sympathize with one another, love one another, be compassionate, and be humble. I am always asking God, what do I need to be doing in this season, whatever season I'm in, because I understand that doing ministry can become so focused on budgets, so focused on assessment in my denomination, so focused on paying the bills, that we could so easily lose what God has called us to do. I'd like to call your attention, I think, to the story of the Good Samaritan. And I use this story because when it comes to ministry, this story challenges me in ways that I think I need to be challenged as a faith leader. We all know the story. There was a legal expert that stood up one day and asked Jesus, he stood up to test Jesus and saying, "What must I do to inherit eternal life?" And we know that that was a duplicitous question because he didn't care, but he was there to trip up Jesus. But Jesus answered, "Well, what's written in the law?" And the lawyer said that you should love the Lord your God with all your heart, soul, mind, and spirit. And Jesus said, "You've answered correctly. Do this and you will live." And okay, and the B clause of that is love your neighbor as yourself. And so the legal expert asked the question, "Well, who is my neighbor?" And Jesus told the story. The man on the Jericho road fell into the hand of thieves, and he was beaten and left for dead. And the first man that came was a Jewish priest. He was the pastor. He was the leader, a descendant of Aaron, and he had to walk down that same hazardous road. But when the priest saw the man laying there bleeding and fighting for his life, he crossed over to the other side. Perhaps rushing to begin the service, Lord have mercy. Perhaps just coming from the service, but he was on his way. Maybe he was on his way to do the business of the temple. But the bottom line is that he, the pastor, the priest, did not stop to help a brother out. And so that thing gets to me because I know that we as leaders can become so concerned with what we are doing and what church traditions are that we miss the moment that God gives us to expand our territory and to do others and to do other things. Now, this man we know was probably concerned with violating the purification rites, which he held highly in that day. It's sad to say he had become so involved with the accoutrements of ministry that this religious man, this leader who was supposed to have the love of God in his heart, he was supposed to have a love for his people, but he was so detached from the painful realities of this suffering man that he crossed over to the other side. He was religious, he had the titles, but his understanding of religion was so rooted in tradition. And we have people like that in our church. We have pastors like that, so rooted in tradition, so rooted in building their own preaching schedule, so rooted in personal comfort, so rooted in their desire for public affirmation that he could not see this wounded man. God help us. He could not see the pain of this man. He could not see his need. And how many times when we are in ministry can the spirit of empathy escape us? This scenario concerns me because I see in this priest the person that many of us have become or could easily become. And I believe that Jesus warns us who have been called daily. He warns us and tells us that yes, our lives are filled with problems. Our lives are filled with situations. Our lives are filled with distraction. But we cannot be those who have been lured away from the people of God, lured into the church and what we do in the ministries and writing sermons and writing papers, that we do not pay attention to the suffering of people, that we don't care about the hurting. Maybe I shouldn't say don't care, but are not aware of the pain that people are going through, the rejected, the imprisoned. And God gives us those people to minister to, but many times in ministry, God help us, we put that on the back burner. But we should never be so busy doing church, never be so busy fighting officers, never be so busy dealing with church minutia that we forget who we are. When folks are wounded and lying in ditches, true people of God cannot walk to the other side. True people of God cannot ignore what is going on in our communities. We must be compelled, or we are compelled, to pick them up. And so my prayer daily is, Lord, don't let me be one of the ones who pretend not to see what we need to see. We have to see it. When there is when there's a hunger issue, when there's a housing issue, that is where our attention should go. I remember when we first came to New York City, just talking to parents and hearing their pain and hearing their concern about the education system, we felt led to open a school because because we understood and we could hear people saying that our children are missing out. Our children need help. And so ministry cannot be just about building my preaching itinerary, just about building my preaching schedule. But it has to be one, our vision has to transcend who we are becoming personally. And we have to really look at building bridges in our communities and building bridges to the people that we serve. To go on with that story, the Levite came to the area where the bleeding man was, and he was also a vital member of the temple, and his assignment was to police the temple and assist the priests in their duties. And the same thing happened. He saw the man, he crossed over to the other side. And that man kind of reminds me of the people, who the people in our church can become if we don't teach them and if we don't show them what God is calling them to do. Jesus is warning all of us in this season, I believe, that we, Lord, help us, that we need to pray and we need to ask God to build in us a kind of empathy, and that God would sanitize our attitudes so that we do not have a church full of people who are more concerned with their positions and their titles than they are with how they treat one another. Ushers, officers can become so absorbed with who they are in the church that they forget to serve the church. So Brueggemann says that compassion constitutes a radical form of criticism, for it announces that the hurt has to be taken seriously, that the hurt people have to be taken seriously, and the hurt that they are experiencing should not be accepted as normal or natural, but is abnormal and unacceptable. And so when we think about ministry in this 21st century, when we think about how narrow ministry can become, that is when we have to reassess our vision for our own ministry, because sometimes our vision can become so human-centered or so denomination-centered that we lose the vision of God, that our souls become so consumed with popularity, our souls become so consumed with what other people are doing, that we forget that we should be like that Samaritan, that foreigner, with whom Jews had no dealing. But when he saw this man, he knew that he had to do something. He was not afraid for his own safety, but rather he took pity on him. And the question is this: what would make him take pity? And this is something that just pricks my heart. He could take pity on that man because he had experienced hatred and he had experienced rejection, which we all have. We can never have a memory so short that we forget that had it not been for the grace of God, some of the things we have accomplished, we would not have accomplished, because we live in a society that is structured so that we don't accomplish and so that we don't become. What would make this man help a Jew? What would make him cross boundaries of race and class and culture to help someone who probably would not have helped him? I suspect it was because this man realized that no matter his race, no matter his religious background, that there was an interconnectedness that determined that their destinies were intertwined with one another. He knew if he allowed this man to die, that something within him would surely die. Some would suggest that that the Good Samaritan was moved by sympathy, but I suggest that it was empathy. And where did his empathy come from? Well, this man knew something about being overlooked. He had lived long enough to see people cross to the other side and leave him for dead. And so he understands that even though the Jericho road was a dangerous place, he could not run away from this wounded man or pretend that he didn't see him. So he knelt down, he poured oil on him, he healed, he did what he could to bring healing into the life, the physical healing into the life of this man. Now, we all know that true empathy and compassion demand more than serving meals for Thanksgiving. True empathy and compassion mean more than giving money to a homeless man on the street. We have been positioned by God to show a compassion for humanity that looks deeper than these acts of compassion, giving a homeless man $1 or $5 or serving a meal at Thanksgiving. We have to look at the structures. We have to see what is perpetuating poverty in our communities and the exclusion of other people. This man says to us that to serve and perhaps move ahead in our own process of healing, then we need to help facilitate the healing of other people. Joan Chittister says that healing begins when one who understands suffering will grieve over the suffering of others. The Samaritan was moved by this man's misery because he recognized his own misery, and he saw in that man something that he had experienced in life. And so facing our own pain and facing our own experiences with racism and with sexism should surely help us to help other people. Because it is when you have been hurt by neglect and hatred and racism that you will not pass, we cannot pass others by. Dr. King said it this way: the Levite priest asked himself, if I stop to help this man, the Levite and the priest asked, if I don't stop to help this man, what's going to happen to me? But the Samaritan asked, if I do not stop to help this man, what will happen to him? And that just becomes our the foundation for how we do ministry and how we become. We're here, you all are in a doctoral program, and you can become, and I know this from personal experience, that we can become so distracted by our own growth and our own advancement in ministry, name recognition, preaching itineraries, that we forget that God has called us to make a difference, no matter how many degrees we get, no matter how our preaching preaching schedule it develops and evolves. God has called us to make a difference. If anyone would come after me, he or she must deny himself, must deny herself. There's so many that need to be rescued by the demeaning and from the demeaning and dehumanizing systems of the world. We all belong to God, and God's grace has laced our lives inextricably. Many of you will go on to do great and marvelous things, but I hear the Lord saying to us today that he's calling us never to lose the reality, never lose touch with the reality that we are those who he is depending on to show compassion, to build bridges in our community, to save the young, to serve the elderly. And because just as the Lord has shown compassion to us, we must show compassion to others. Now, when people ask me, what should the church look like in this 21st century, when you have a mess in Washington, when you have mass shootings, when you have still the dumbing down of education, what should we be doing? What should the church look like? I believe, my sisters and brothers, that God is calling the church to transcend ancient and current animosities and hostilities that happen in the church, outside the church, in between denominations and between even groups within our church. God is calling us to the end to transcend those the traditions and the established church cultures. He's calling us to transcend human boundaries and human philosophies and human attachments, and to the end that we can be reconciled to each other and that we can serve each other, and so that we can share our gifts with each other. The church of the 21st century not only is a church that church growth is good, and virtual church is there and is here, and I think it's going to be here. But understand this, we are still the church that must have authority over demons and devils and spiritual wickedness in high places. Yes, the church has changed, but we still have the power to speak to mountains and have them crumble. We still have a responsibility to speak truth to power. We still have to have a responsibility to take on power and to confront them and to let them know what their responsibility is to the people of God. We cannot be an isolated church, but we must come together and work together regardless of denominations. Amen. Pentecostals got to hook up with Baptists, and Baptists have to hook up with Methodists, and it has to be a combined effort for the sake of the people, for the sake of God's kingdom. Jesus saw us when we were hurt, when we were bleeding, when we had messed up, and we must create these cultures within God's church that helps those who to feel welcome, those who need us, and those who need another kind of relationship to find their place in the church of the true and living God. Exclusion cannot be our mantra, but rather inclusion, love, a beloved community, the community that understands that even though I might have been dropped, even though I might have been overlooked, I can never repeat that offense, but rather I'm going to be the one that God uses to change a community. How many of us know that when you are called to preach and when you are called to pastor, you're not just called to a church, but you're called to a community. The community may not be a part of your church, but the church has to be such a strong and dynamic presence within the community that others will come to Christ because of the work that you do in the community or because of your presence in the community. So when you hear of opportunities to make a difference, whether it's on a small level or a large level. I remember when we wrote the first proposal for senior housing. That was something that I don't think either Floyd or myself imagined. But when you see a community going down, 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 and you know that God has put you in that community, then you ask yourself, what can I do to stop the decline and perhaps facilitate a kind of growth? What can I do to help facilitate and preserve a community that houses my people? We should never be content with people moving away from us, but we want to create a situation in which perhaps people will feel comfortable in our communities because of the church, the presence of my church, because of the ministry that I am sharing with the community. And so as we talk about building bridges, when I first saw it, I thought of it, I was thinking about maybe just racial reconciliation. But it's not just racial, it's cultural, it's diverse, a kind of diversity that says that there'll be people in my church, in my congregation, or in my ministry, people that I lead that will be in the poverty level, and then there are going to be some who are doing very, very well. But how can we be a church that fills the needs of both, and that makes the undereducated and the uneducated comfortable with those who have the PhDs and those who are the politicians and those who are the teachers or whatever? So when we talk about building bridges, it is something that we cannot deny. It is something that we cannot walk away from. It is a continual process. It is a continual journey for those of us who are in ministry. I was in ministry. We were called to Queens in 1976. So we've been here 40 plus years. And the way we're having to do ministry today is so very different from the way we started out in 1976. And me with my old self is dealing with issues that I have had to read and pray and ask God to expand my thinking and because I'm dealing with stuff that I never thought that I would be dealing with. It's just getting brought, and I'm ready to retire about now because I'm saying, Lord, this is what I'm dealing with now. I never thought I would have to deal with personal issues, very personal issues. Children are going to school and getting beat up by girls being beat up by girls because they want them to have a certain sexual orientation, and I mean it's just getting to be so much. But that call to empathy is something that we cannot walk away from, because the Lord never walked away from us, and because God has nurtured us through our messes. God has nurtured us through our ups and downs, our faithless moments, our moments that we, went off in the wrong direction, but he got us back in the right direction. Ministry is certainly becoming more complex and more demanding of us. And it has caused me, I will admit, to expand my heart. My heart has become bigger in 2023 than it was in 2013, than it was in 1993. I see myself loving differently. I see myself trying to understand the trauma that other people, that our young people are going through, and that some of our older people, a trauma that I never could have imagined on so many levels. And so when we talk about building bridges, the question is, how far am I willing to go? To what extent am I willing to give my life to ministry? To what extent am I going to stop just dealing with a local body, but contribute to the bigger picture, to contribute to the kingdom of the true and living God? God does not put us in high places for us to become content. But the higher God takes you, when you get that degree, when you walk across that stage, that should put within all of us, as God promotes and advances us, a deeper longing for the greater good of the people of God. When God does what God is going to do, as you're writing your papers and as you are focusing on becoming Dr. Mobley and Dr. McCrae and Dr. Rasco, what does that mean? What does God require of you now that God has taken you to a level that perhaps you would have never imagined? It's not just about the title. It's really about the work that God will give you an opportunity to do. It's about putting God's hand and anointing you for a greater life, a greater ministry, a greater preaching assignment, a greater pastoral assignment. God does nothing by happenstance, but God has a plan for everyone's life. And as you're talking about building bridges, as you're talking about connecting with one another, the question that we must all ask ourselves is, what does this moment open the door to? Not just for me personally, but what does this moment open the door to as it relates to my ministry, as it relates to helping the people of God? I think my time is up. I had 30 minutes. And I'd like to take some questions.
Dr. Flake, you have just.
I can't hear you, sir.
Can you all hear me now?
I can hear you now, yes.
Okay, good. You have just put us in a place as we ponder over empathy and its relationship to what does this moment open the door to do for us as it relates to ministry and the people of God. We're going to move into question and answers, but let's just give God praise for the ministry gift that is in front of us. My God. Dr. Flake, I want to thank you for giving us this opportunity to hear your heart, your expanded heart, as you have mentioned it over 4 decades in ministry there in Queens. And I want to just say this, and then I open it up to everybody. Both you now leading the church and your husband, I remember him when I was doing some work at Harvard in Dr. Preston Williams Community and Economic Development Institute. And your husband shared, and when we got our doctorates at United, he was a part of that process as well.
And he's even helped us here at Virginia University of Lynchburg when Dr. Ralph Rivas was president in our D-Men program. And now to have you is just full circle and amazing. But I want to know, with all of the subsidiary corporations that you all have there at Allen AME Church, the whole notion of the Allen Women's Resource, the Federal Credit Union, the Community Senior Citizen Center, the housing corporations and funds, the neighborhood preservation and development pieces, the Christian school, the home care agency, all of it. How did you all get all of that going, and how did you keep it going? Can you share that with us?
Sure. You know, I think it goes back to what I said when I said Floyd's philosophy was always, I'm called to this community. Not just called to this church, I'm called to this community. And you look around your community and you see what would make it better. So, of course, I think at first was the building of the senior citizens units. So he just kept going. He just kept going downtown and saying, this is what I want to do, what I want to do. And it eventually became a reality. The Allen Women's Resource Center was something I wanted to do. The school was something that I knew that would benefit not only my children, but would benefit hundreds, if not thousands of children. We had the Allen Christian School grades pre-K through 12, through 8 for over 29 years. So think of the children that we were able to educate. And many people don't believe in, private school, but ours was unique in that, we just really pounded into them a kind of moral compass. And we not only had devotions every morning, but just trying to create a kind of soul strength in our young people so that they could go on to become who many of them who have become. But it's really, and then it's getting the congregation to partner with you, because until we had to close, we still have the lower school, but we had to close the high school, the junior high school, because the church could no longer, we were putting $2 million a year into the school to make it a great school. But when the recession of 2009 came, we just couldn't do it anymore. But we continue to fund, because all of these programs require church intervention at times, because the state is never doesn't always get the money back. So we've had to make payroll, and we may get reimbursed, but we've had to do, the churches had to partner with every program that we have, because the church has really been the funder in many instances of those programs. Again, sometimes we get reimbursement, sometimes we don't. But it's just having the people of God understand that to do ministry is more than paying the light bill and to pay pastor salary and having pastoral anniversaries. And I don't knock any of that, but it has to be the vision for church and the vision for ministry has to expand. Because if you're only, spending the year getting ready for Women's Day, Men's Day, and the pastor's anniversary, then your reach is going to be limited. But when your vision is for a greater good, when your vision is for what can I do next? What can I do next? Who can I help next? What problem needs to be tackled now? That just brings a whole new dimension to ministry. So housing, when we first did the housing, we were just taking old houses, renovating them, and selling them to first-time homeowners, because too many of our people were renting. and not owning homes. And so that became something we really wanted to do. We wanted to make people in our community homeowners. And so we were able to get grants and get funding to build 2-family houses for first-time homeowners. And that meant that they could rent out the upstairs, and the upstairs rent would help them pay the mortgage. So it's just like, what can we do to better the lives of people? What can we do to let them experience the abundant life that Jesus came? What can we do to change their mentality? I remember that for about 25 years, Floyd's, as he was doing the collecting the offering, he would say 10% to God, 10% to yourself, because we have to stop investing in depreciating assets and invest in appreciating assets. And the greatest appreciating asset is home ownership. And, you know, it's not the cars, it's not the designer bags, it's not the designer shoes, it's appreciating. So it's educating a people, educating a community to understand that there is another way to live, that they, society doesn't always tell us this. It's really about, it's incumbent upon pastors and leaders to change the thinking of so many of the people in our community. And let me just say this, I remember I wanted to do prison ministry. So I called a prison leader, not a warden, but he was something in the prison system. He said, if you want to do prison ministry, you know what you need to do? He said, start a school. And we looked at him, he said, because our children are being undereducated and poorly educated, they are on the, they're in the pipeline. And so he said, if you really want to do prison ministry, I need you to start a school. And when he said that, it was that, okay, I get it. I really get it. I get it. And so that's what we did. That's, that was another motivation for us to start a school.
All right, listen, everybody, I'm going to turn the mic over or floor to everybody to raise questions. But as far as I'm concerned, we can shut this whole colloquium down. That response she just gave, Dr. Elaine Flake, I wish I had heard you 30 years ago. My goodness, what problem needs to be tackled now? What's next? In other words, if all our focus is what is going to get people to come in the church and to preach to on Sunday and have these anniversaries, and that's it. Needs to be tackled now. What's going to make people in our community and our community better?
Right.
And all of you coming out of this colloquium ought to not only hear this, that includes me, I'm the dean. Every one of us need to hear Flake, hear Campbell when he talks about what they're doing in Bible Way and other places. This is critical. Questions from everybody. Got to open your mic and raise a question.
Okay, Dr. Coleman, this is Deborah Harris. My question
Go ahead,
Dr. Dr. Flake. I've heard you and your husband speak numerous times because you were on television. And plus I'm from the Houston area, Houston, Texas. My question is this, in teaching empathy, because you said the statement you made that it is the door to humanity, and sometimes people get in their shell and they're comfortable. Do you have any particular authors that you recommend or books that you recommend for supporting teaching this?
Supporting what now?
Supporting teaching empathy, like we have a church, I don't want to say a church school, but and I don't want to use the word Sunday school, but a Sunday hour where we have different classes Do you have any particular books or authors that you would recommend for teaching empathy?
Okay, so I found a couple of articles by Brueggemann. You probably can just kind of Google those, but there was a book. Let me go up in my by Helen Reis, Reiss. The Empathy Effect was one that I quoted. She says that empathy is the door to a humane humanity. It is the tool for building bridges.
Okay.
And that whole thing of empathy came to me because you really encounter so many biases in the church, and there seems to be a lack of compassion in the hearts of some of God's, the most sainted saints. There's just this lack of compassion in Usher's heart. You need to sit here, and so, you need to pick that baby up. It's just that lack of compassion that exists in the church, and so that's a whole thing in and of itself. Is I may not agree with you theologically on some issues. I may not even understand how it feels to have an autistic child, but there should be something in me that gives, that shows compassion to a mother who is desperate, trying to come to church, trying to get, and this autistic child, the only thing she can do is bring the child, but the child may be a little distracting, but don't let me be the one to make that mother feel like she's not welcomed in church. And so, I mean, there are just so many nuances now in ministry that we're having to deal with that we never had to deal with before. Not to say that autism was not did not exist 30 years ago, but you didn't hear the word so much, and maybe people didn't come to church. I don't know what happened, but that's what I'm dealing with now. Children with special needs, and how do we provide a place for them in church? How do we set a stage so a parent who God knows is being stressed and strained, how can we provide a situation where she or he, or she and he can come to church and worship, because they need worship more than anything. They need God's strength.
Okay, thank you so much.
Very good, Dr. Harris. The next question. So if you notice here is a practitioner who has identified problems and come back with a viable bridge building solution.
Mm-hmm.
And that have had sustainability. And by way of assessment, when things needed to be adjusted, they've done that. If
Right.
every one of us could replicate that, and even if you need to go to Queens, go and see it for yourself. Worshipers on the inside make a difference on the outside. Go ahead. Who else want to?
I was going to say that. Okay, you go, and I hear a question.
Oh no, ma'am. I can wait.
No, go on. I won't forget.
Okay. I was going to ask. So we're kind of in this phase at the church I'm in, with regards to trying to do kind of the things that you're talking about, but we live in a red state. So there's not always. It doesn't seem that there's always an access to funding. So my question was, how did you get funding for certain programs? What partnerships did you consider crucial and critical to build? And what type of needs assessment did you develop to really see the particular needs of the community?
Well, the first thing that I remember is that Floyd fostered relationships with the politicians. red and blue. The political arena was not as divisive and divided in the 70s and the 80s as it is now. So he fostered relationships with every, and he was so intentional about that, with the congressmen, with the city council people, with state representatives, because they all want to come to you when they are running. They want to come in and make their political spills, and sometimes you don't see them again. And so you got to know who your representatives are. You got to know where the money is. And then you have to do your research, because even though you're in a red state, you have access, you are entitled to, some of the money that's being distributed. So you get to know the politicians, get to know the city council people, just, see how you can make requests of them, especially if they're trying to come to your church and make political speeches. They can't just come in and speak and then leave until the next election time. They have a responsibility to your church, to your community. And they have to know that you know that, and that you believe that, and that you're not going away. I do remember when Floyd, when they asked him to run for Congress, that was something that I did not want. And I fought against it because, I saw him, that he needed to be in the church. And finally, he said to me, "I promise you, I can do more for our people in that, in that office." And he did. He was able to bring jobs to the community. He built buildings in the community that again enhanced the community. And he was able to work with Republicans. Al D'Amato he and Al D'Amato co-authored bills to bring things to the community. So I guess what I'm saying, let's just not think of church as just church. We've got to be the tool that God uses to see evil, to dismantle structures, to make demands, and to expand the territory. Ministry cannot just be our platform, but ministry has to be something that we do for the people of God.
That was a great question, sir. Next.
Dr. Mays.
Yeah, my question and statement, and I want to thank you, Dr. Flake, for sharing with us today. You blew my mind when you stated that we can be distracted by, and I'm not quoting it exactly, but by our own stuff, such as ministry engagement and etc. What I really want to know, as busy as you may be, and your husband, Dr. Flake may be, when you were going through the doctoral process, how did you separate engagements, preaching moments, participation from your studies?
Oh God, it was only through the grace of God. When I went to seminary, my youngest child was like 6, and my oldest was kind of headed toward high school. It has to be a family. For me, it had to be a family thing. I can remember driving my daughter to school, and she was testing me with Old Testament questions and whatever. But when it came to the D-men, well, now Floyd, think about this. Floyd was in Congress. But and Floyd cannot, he never got an opportunity to learn keyboard. And so Floyd wrote his dissertation longhand. But he would come in and he would sit at that dining room table and he would write, and he did it, and his secretary had to had to type it for him. So he was the quintessential juggler. and he would go to he would go to Washington. He would come home, and he would write, and he maybe lose sleep, but he'd get up again and go back to Washington, take the children to school, hop the plane and go back to Washington, and then he'd come back. Then he would take off the week to go to Dayton. I mean, he really, really, he got his degree first. And so when I went to United, I had watched him, and you know, we just juggled it to make it work. He would come home to help the children with their homework while I was writing. Because our you know, Washington's only a plane ride away, he literally came home every night. He would just come home and he would help, you know, he would do the grocery shopping, he would do whatever he needed so that I could finish my writing. But and while I was writing, I was still at the Allen Christian School. I was still running the women's ministry and doing other things, but you just kind of make it work. It was a season, and it was a difficult season for us on so many levels, but thank God seasons pass and storms pass over, and so we were able to make it work. But that's why when, you know, when some of these students come to me, I'm gonna have to drop out of this ministry because I'm in a PhD program, I'm looking at them and say, girl, no, you don't. You're just dropping out. Because, you know, there is a way. You don't have to, you're choosing to, because you know, you get no sympathy from one who had 4 children and still had to run a school and a church and do and fulfill preaching engagements and whatever. You just can make it work, but you've got to decide what's important.
Mays, that was a powerful question. I'm putting in the chat, there is a way. Y'all better write that down on a piece of paper and put it up. So somewhere there is a way for you to do everything you're doing, even if you may have to eliminate 1 or 2 things to get the work. That's powerful. Every one of y'all like to hear that. That was powerful. There is a way. Wow.
Oh yeah,
listen,
there is a way.
Yeah, there's a way. There's a way. Yeah, I needed that. That thank you, Mays. That question gave me fuel. There is a way. That somebody gonna preach that. There is a way. I got it. I listen.
Dr. James Coleman gonna preach it.
Yeah, you better believe it. Let me ask this as we bring in closure, and then I'd like to hear from Dr. Jackson, our Associate Dean, and Dr. Campbell to close us out. But Dr. Flake, in your very popular work, God in Her Midst, Preaching Healing to Hurting Women, she hadn't talked about this, but she is a phenomenal preacher. Can you give us a nugget from that could help us today in terms of what you advance in that book, God in Her Midst, Preaching Healing to Hurting Women, as we contemplate our theme today?
Yeah, you know what? When I was at St. Paul Church, I had never seen Women's Day become anything but a fundraiser. I experienced my first women's conference, and Reverend Cecilia Bryan had workshops for single mothers. She had workshops for single women. She had workshops for married people, women who've been victims of domestic violence or sexual abuse. And I was saying, oh my God, you can do this in church? You know, you can address these issues in church? I had never heard anybody do that. And so I think that planted a kind of seed that let me know that ministry could be for men and women a little bit more than, you know, that some of these issues should be tackled head on, should be addressed. Now, so when I started looking at Women's Day and other things, then I had another vision for ministry, saying, you know, we can understand that there are women and men in our community who have suffered sexual abuse. They have low self-esteem, they have anger, they have all of this stuff going on. And yes, we have been a church that preached Jesus, but have we touched them in their hurting their real hurting places. And so that just became something that I became committed to do. Now, fast forward, when I went to Union Seminary, Dolores Williams, who is like the godmother of womanism, was my teacher. And so she introduced me even, I mean, she, you know, to even more womanist thought about how we have to care about every aspect of our community. It's not just about the women. And if you look at the definition of womanism, it is, you know, we are women who care about ourselves, who care about our children and our men. And so we don't ever want to not empathize with the brothers or empathize with the children, to empathize with each other. So sometimes I've had to look at people who rejected me, you know, well, the discipline doesn't call for a co-pastor. You know, you don't worry about that. You just go in and do what you do. Don't worry about the people who don't follow you. You celebrate the ones who do. And you try to minister to them in their hurting places. Because if you talk to someone and they're dealing with rejection, you know, my husband left or my wife left or whatever, that's a real issue. And sometimes it helps just to say there's life beyond divorce, or this breakup should not break you down. You know, I just think that, you know, those are the things that need to be articulated from the pulpit. Preaching healing. My book was Preaching Healing to Hurting Women, but that certainly doesn't mean that we don't try to divorce ourselves from the male experience, the Black male experience in America. I mean, if you're preaching to 200 men, I guarantee you 180 of those men have been stopped unnecessarily by cops. They've been racially profiled. They have been demeaned in other ways. So we cannot become so focused on female issues that we forget that our men, they've been to wars and they've come home and then been discriminated against. So, I mean, it's just about being aware of everyone's experience, though you may not have experienced it yourself, just being aware of what's going on around you, being aware of what men are going through, what women, what children are going through, that women are being abused. And if a woman is being abused, she certainly doesn't need to come to church and be abused by an usher, male or female. It's really just the kind of making people aware of each other and the experiences of other people.
That's rich. Rich. Thank you, Dr. Flake. Melvin, did you want to say something before Dr. Jackson and Dr. Campbell? Rasco, okay, I see a hand up. Okay, Dr. Jackson, if you would like to say a word to us, and followed by Dr. Campbell.
Yes, sir.
I see Dr.
Coleman,
Rasco, Melvin Rasco.
Thank you for this opportunity to share. This week has been one of rich and growth for me. I'm hearing our speakers and the things that they are saying. I think should encourage us to be the best you that God can put forward to build bridges and to make way. I thank Dr. Flake for the idea of empathy, because again, we're seeing that in our present world, and how that no one cares about anyone, but the love of God reaches, that builds that bridge. That, and so we want to thank you for this rich lecture, or whatever it's called, but it has been good to hear. And I like that last statement you made about getting your work done. You know, sometimes we have students who get started and they get kind of tripped up, but I think you made a profound statement that helped me. We just need to get it done, make time. And I believe that when we have that kind of attitude, God will give us what we need to persevere and to be successful in our assignment. And he's called us to. all of our speakers this week. I've just gained a lot from you. I've been here writing notes and doing everything, being able to compile all of this. And I think it will be helpful for me as we go forward in ministry. So thank you so much for sharing your time, your intellect, and your empathy with us. Thank you, Dr. Cole.
Amen.
That was good, Dr. Jackson. Dr. Campbell, you on mute, Doc.
I had to put my apparatus on mute because I was making so much noise while you were talking, and I didn't want everybody to hear how excited I was about the things that you were saying to us. Dr. Flake, I just want to say to you that prior to you coming on, I was talking about that there is a tremendous difference between church work and the work of the church. And certainly when you talked about your rainbow teas and all of the things that we do in regard to church work, we tend to miss the work of the church. And what you have given us today is the work of the church. And so in closing, I just want to say to you, I have followed the ministry for years and know a lot of my colleagues who's connected also with the ministry there. There is a scripture that says, well done. Many times we are well said. We say more than we do. The ministry there, you're not just saying it, you're doing it. You have done it and you continue to do it. So thank you so much. And we certainly look forward to greater things happening in the future for you. And of course, at the church there that you attend. God bless you. Thank you, Dr. Cole.
Well, that was powerful, Campbell. Campbell and Jackson, I think I want to enroll in the D-Men program. I want to hear powerful stuff like that. Maze's incisive question that was raised earlier. This is, yes, Nathaniel Gamillion, this has been a great lecture. Put your hands together and let's celebrate one more time the ministry gift of Dr. Elaine Flake. We're going to make sure that you are properly taken care of, Dr. Flake, and we look forward to reaching out to you later and seeing other ways that you might be a blessing to our learning community. So thank you so much for being with us today. And any final words you'd like to say to us, and then we're going to get these persons ready to dismiss themselves from day 4.
No, I wish everyone the best. I know that you're busy, but just keep plugging away. I'm so impressed with the number of people that are on the screen. And as God is moving in your life and as God is promoting you, I know that the church is going to see some very spectacular ministry coming from the body of people, because I just believe it. I just believe that God is anointing you for a future that you perhaps cannot see, but you know, it's there, and God is expanding the territory of people, the church of the true and living God, and just be happy to be one of the tools that God will use to make a difference.
Wow.
Dr. Flake, you just dumped some stuff on us. You know, you all just had to forgive me. But those of you who feel like it, just lift your hands up in the air and receive what she just said over your life and over your ministry and over your family and over your community, over this school. God, thank you for that impartation. Wow. God bless you, Dr. Flake.
Wow.
Wow.
I believe God.
And Coleman.
Yes, sir.
Coleman, just to add to that, when you said for us to raise our hands, normally we do this and we extend that to others. I just want everybody to turn their hands to themselves.
Yeah. Yes, Lord.
I hear you, Campbell.
That's right.
Yes, Lord. Yes, Lord. Oh my God.
Dr. Coleman. Dr.
Yes,
Coleman,
sir.
you just stated that you want to become a part of the D-Men program at Virginia University of Lynchburg. Well, I want to tell you how you can become a part.
Tell me what to do, Doc.
Fill out the application. and pay your tuition.
And pay my tuition. I think I would do that, sir. I think I would do that. Listen, everybody, this has been a wonderful day. You all opened up, giving us some great insights on connecting the dots. We can't thank God enough for the lectures from Dr. Cook and Dr. Flake. And so now Dr. Campbell will give us parting words, but you're going to ready yourselves for day 5. Can you imagine? Friday is already here. I hear Jerome Ross from back at Virginia Union saying Sunday's coming and it's time to preach. Well, it's Friday already. And tomorrow we'll get going at 10 o'clock. You don't want to miss Dr. Matt Wilmington. Again, he comes from a very different perspective. Dr. Elaine Flake just talked to you about being able to understand others. Well, we thought it not robbery to go into the white evangelical world and have an appreciation for the son of Mr. Bible. Some of you who remember his father, Harold Wilmington. He's written most of the masterpieces on the Bible and has done it not so much from a conservative perspective as such, but truly engaged in exegetical hermeneutical approaches that are somewhat amazing from the liberty background. But at any rate, Matt is Harold Wilmington's son. And he really he's been with us before. That's why we've invited him back at the wishes of Dr. Campbell, because he understands us and he understands the plight that we go through. So you'll hear from him in the morning. He's the executive pastor at Thomas Road and adjunct professor for pastoral leadership at the School of Divinity there at Liberty. And then after him, some type of way, we're going to hear from Dr. Carlos Williams, who's going to help us put this in perspective as it relates to, now that we've heard all of this, what are we to do with it when it comes to preaching? How does this show up in our preaching going forward and our teaching going forward? So I hope you will enjoy that, and then we'll conclude. I'm gonna turn it over to Dr. Campbell, but somebody put in the chat was just recorded. Dr. Morton, please break it to me easy. Last session and this, in fact, were recorded, correct?
Yes, it has been recorded.
Very good, thank you. Okay, Dr. Campbell?
All right, thank you, Dr. Coleman, for those announcements. At this time, if we could ask the staff to stay on for just a few minutes. God bless you. See you all in the morning.
Now, let me say this. There was a couple of students that wanted to talk to me. I think it might have been Michelle and did we work that out, Dr. Morton?
Michelle, and who's the second person?
I think it was Briscoe.
Ms. Briscoe.
Driscoll.
What I'm going to do is I'm going to put you all in the waiting room, and after the staff is finished, I'll bring you back. So and everyone else have a wonderful day. Michelle. Okay, I think we still have a couple of students on. I'll wait for them to sign off.
Yeah, you have Gil, Chris,